At my wedding reception, I watched my mother-in-law slip a packet of white powder into my champagne flute. She wanted me to pass out face first into the wedding cake, or worse. Instead of screaming, I waited for her to turn her back, and I switched our glasses. When she raised that glass for a toast, looking me dead in the eye with a wicked smirk, I smiled right back and took a sip of my water. 5 minutes later, the real show began. Before I tell you how I turned her trap into her worst nightmare, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to outsmart a toxic in-law. My name is Tasha, and at 35 years old, I have built a life most people only dream of. I am a clinical pharmacist with a doctorate. I own my own home in DC, and my investment portfolio is aggressive. I did not come from old money. I built my empire shift by grueling shift calculating dosages and saving lives while my peers were partying. My husband Dante comes from a different world. He is a third-generation architect from a prominent Atlanta family, the kind that cares more about which country club you belong to than your actual character. We were getting married at a private vineyard on Martha's Vineyard, a location selected entirely to appease his mother Beatrice. Beatrice is the chairwoman of the Heritage Charity Foundation, a woman who wears her family name like a weapon. To her, I was just new money, a pill counter who was not good enough for her golden boy. She wanted Dante to marry Vanessa, a woman from their social circle, whose only talent was spending her daddy's money and looking down on anyone who actually worked for a living. I was standing in the bridal suite adjusting the strap of my custom silk gown. I had paid $15,000 for this dress with my own card, a fact that seemed to annoy Beatrice to no end. The room was quiet, lined with antique mirrors. Through the reflection of the vanity mirror, I saw the door creak open behind me. It was Beatrice. She thought I was too absorbed in my reflection to notice her. She walked over to the small table where two crystal flutes of champagne were waiting for the pre-reception toast. One glass had a white ribbon for the bride, the other had a gold ribbon for the mother of the groom. I watched frozen as her hand hovered over my glass. With a quick, practiced flick of her wrist, she emptied a small packet of white powder into my drink. The bubbles fizzed up aggressively for a second, swallowing the evidence. My pharmacist brain kicked into high gear instantly. I analyzed the powder from the reflection. It was too granular to be arsenic, and the volume was too high for cyanide. Based on the slight blue tint as it dissolved, I knew exactly what it was. It was a cocktail of high-dose sedatives, likely a benzodiazepine mixed with a potent laxative. She did not want to kill me. She wanted to humiliate me. She wanted the guests to see the new bride slurring her words, looking like a drunk, and then soiling her expensive custom dress in front of the entire black elite of the East Coast. It was a social assassination attempt. She stirred it with her pinky finger, wiped her hand on a napkin, and plastered a fake smile on her face. "Tasha, darling," she called out, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Are you ready? We cannot keep the senator waiting." I turned around slowly. My heart was pounding not from fear, but from a cold, sharp anger. I could have called her out right then. I could have screamed, but that would make me look like the angry, crazy woman she always painted me to be. No. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be surgical. I walked toward her, beaming. "Beatrice," I said, ignoring the champagne she was extending toward me. "I have to say that dress is a bold choice. I saw a very similar design on a clearance rack last season, but I think yours is a much better replica. The stitching almost looks authentic." Her smile faltered. Beatrice prided herself on wearing only couture. The suggestion that she was wearing a knockoff was a slap in the face. She immediately looked down at her bodice, flustered, her vanity overriding her malice for a split second. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, looking at her reflection in the mirror to check the stitching I had mentioned. "This is a vintage Dior. That was my window." In the 3 seconds she was distracted inspecting her own reflection with insecurity, I reached out and switched the glasses. It was a seamless movement, one I had practiced 1,000 times in the lab when transferring volatile compounds. By the time she looked back up, the glass with the white ribbon was in her hand, and the glass with the gold ribbon was in mine. Oh, my mistake, I said, taking a step back. The lighting in here is tricky. You look lovely, Beatrice. She narrowed her eyes at me, but she did not notice the swap. She was too arrogant. She believed she was the smartest person in the room, and she believed I was just a naive pharmacist who measured pills for a living. She thrust the glass she was holding toward me. Let us drink, she said, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. To a union that will surely be memorable. She clinked her glass against mine. I watched her bring the crystal rim to her lips. I watched her throat move as she swallowed the entire contents of the glass. The sedative, the laxative, all of it. I brought my glass to my lips, but I did not drink. I pretended to sip, letting the liquid barely touch my tongue before lowering it. Expensive taste, I said. Just then the door opened and Dante walked in. He looked dashing in his tuxedo, completely oblivious to the warfare that had just occurred. He saw his mother and his wife standing together holding champagne, and his face lit up with relief. Look at the two most beautiful women in my life, he said, coming over to kiss my cheek. I am so glad to see you two bonding. Mom, thank you for being so welcoming. Beatrice smiled at him, the drugs already beginning to hit her bloodstream, though she did not know it yet. Of course, Dante. I just want what is best for the family legacy. She looked at me, and for a second her vision seemed to swim. She blinked, shaking her head slightly. Are you okay, Mom? Dante asked. I am fine. She snapped a little too aggressively. Just the heat. Let us go out. The guests are waiting for the speeches. We walked out of the bridal suite and onto the manicured lawn of the vineyard. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and old money. A string quartet was playing soft classical music. Hundreds of guests turned to look at us. There were judges, doctors, and even a few minor celebrities. This was the audience Beatrice lived for. This was the stage she had built to destroy me. We made our way to the head table. I sat down, smoothing my dress, and placed my full glass of champagne on the table. Beatrice stood at the podium, gripping the microphone a little too tightly. She was swaying. Just a fraction of an inch, but I saw it. The benzodiazepine was a fast-acting agent, especially when mixed with alcohol. She tapped the microphone. The sound echoed across the vineyard, silencing the crowd. Good evening, everyone, she said. Her words were slightly slurred, like the edges were melting. Dante leaned over to me, whispering, Is Mom okay? She sounds tired. I looked at him, my expression the picture of innocent concern. She did seem a bit flushed in the suite, Dante. Maybe she had too much pre-wedding wine. Beatrice continued, I want to propose a toast to my son Dante, the architect of my dreams, and to his new wife, Tasha. She said my name with a sneer, but then she paused. She blinked rapidly, the microphone dipping in her hand. The filter that usually kept her malice hidden behind polite society words was dissolving along with the stomach lining in her gut. Tasha, she repeated, giggling inappropriately. You know, when Dante told me he was marrying a pharmacist, I thought, well, at least we will get free drugs. A nervous ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Dante stiffened beside me. Mom, he said, half rising. Sit down, Beatrice yelled into the mic, the sound screeching. I am speaking. You always were soft, Dante, just like your father. That is why I had to handle everything. That is why I had to fix this little problem. She pointed a shaking finger at me. I sat perfectly still, my face calm, while inside, I was counting down the seconds. The pharmacokinetics of the laxative were about to kick in. She thinks she has won, Beatrice announced, leaning heavily on the podium. She thinks she can just walk into this family with her department store shoes, and her scholarship degree. But I fixed it. I put the powder in. I watched it dissolve. The crowd gasped. Phones were coming out now. People were recording. This was not just a drunk toast. This was a confession. Dante looked at me horrified. What is she talking about? I looked at him, my voice cool and steady. I think your mother is unwell, Dante. Or maybe she is finally being honest. Beatrice's face suddenly contorted. Her hand flew to her stomach. The color drained from her skin, leaving her looking gray and clammy. The double dose of laxatives I had detected in the glass was hitting her with the force of a freight train. I, she stammered into the microphone. And then it happened. A loud, unmistakable sound amplified by the microphone she was clutching against her midsection. The sound of her digestive system engaging in a violent, uncontrollable evacuation. The silence that followed was absolute. Beatrice looked down, her eyes wide with horror, as the stain began to spread across the front of her vintage ivory gown. She swayed her knees, buckling under the combined weight of the sedatives and the shock. "Oh God," she moaned, the microphone catching every wet guttural sound. She collapsed forward, crashing directly into the 5-tier wedding cake. Frosting and sponge cake exploded everywhere. She lay there in the ruins of the dessert, groaning, her expensive dress ruined, her dignity obliterated. Pandemonium broke out. Guests were screaming. Dante rushed to the stage. I stood up slowly, ensuring my movements were graceful. I did not rush. I walked over to the disaster zone with the calm authority of a medical professional. "Call 911. I instructed a stunned waiter. "She is having a medical episode." I looked down at Beatrice. She was struggling to lift her head from the cake frosting smeared across her face like a clown mask. Her eyes met mine, glassy and confused but full of hate. "You," she wheezed. "You did this." I leaned in close so only she and Dante could hear. "No, Beatrice. I just returned to sender." Before Dante could process what she said, a woman in a red dress pushed through the crowd. It was Vanessa, the ex-girlfriend Beatrice had wanted Dante to marry. She looked frantic. "What did you do to her?" Vanessa screamed at me, grabbing my arm. "You poisoned her. I saw you looking at the glasses." I pulled my arm away sharply. "Do not touch me. And if you are accusing me of something, you better have proof, because I will sue you for slander before you can blink." Vanessa turned to Dante. "Dante, listen to me. Your mother told me she was going to handle Tasha today, but Tasha must have switched it. Tasha is the one with access to drugs." Dante looked at Vanessa, then at his mother writhing in the cake, and finally at me. His eyes were full of doubt. "Tasha," he asked, his voice trembling, "did you switch the glasses?" I looked at my husband. This was the moment he had to choose, and in his eyes I saw the hesitation. I saw the weakness. He was considering it. He was actually considering that I was the villain, even after his mother had just confessed on the microphone to putting powder in a drink. I reached into the hidden pocket of my dress and pulled out a small, sealed plastic bag. Inside was a syringe containing a few milliliters of liquid. "What is that?" Dante asked. "Evidence," I said coldly. "When I saw your mother put something in my glass, I used a pipette from my emergency kit to take a sample before I switched them. I am a scientist, Dante. I document everything. We can give this to the paramedics. We can let the lab decide who tried to poison whom." Dante stared at the syringe. The reality of his mother's actions was crashing down on him, but his instinct was still to protect her. "Tasha, put that away," he hissed. "We can handle this privately. Do not ruin the family name." I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "Ruin the family name. Dante, look around you. Your mother is lying in a pile of cake covered in her own waste after confessing to poisoning the bride. The family name is already ruined. The only question left is whether you are going down with the ship." I turned away from him and signaled to the paramedics who were just bursting through the doors. "Over here," I shouted. "We have a suspected overdose of sedatives and laxatives. Treat for toxicity." As they loaded a moaning, filthy Beatrice onto the stretcher, I caught the eye of a woman standing in the shadows near the catering tent. It was Emily, Jamal's wife. Jamal was Dante's younger brother. Emily was pale, her hand covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I walked over to her. "Emily!" She looked at me, her eyes wide with terror and recognition. "You switched them," she whispered. You actually switched them. I nodded. I had to. Emily grabbed my hand, her grip like a vice. She did this to me, Tasha. 3 years ago at my baby shower. I got sick. Violent cramps. I lost the baby. Everyone said it was just a miscarriage, but I always suspected. I drank the punch she handed me, and an hour later, I was bleeding. A cold chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the night air. This was not just a mean mother-in-law prank. Beatrice was a predator. She had done this before, and she had killed an unborn child. I squeezed Emily's hand. We are going to burn her down, Emily. Not just for today, but for your baby. Do you have any proof? Any records? Emily nodded, her fear turning into a hard resolve. I was the accountant for her charity before she made me quit. I have the bank statements. I have the emails where she talks about buying specialty supplements from illegal sites. Good, I said, because this wedding is over, but the war has just started. I looked back at Dante, who was arguing with the paramedics, trying to stop them from taking the police report. I took off my veil and dropped it on the grass. I am going to the hospital, I told Emily. Meet me there in an hour. Bring the laptop. As I walked toward the ambulance, I knew my marriage was likely over before the ink on the license was dry. But I did not care. I was not a victim. I was the one holding the syringe, and I was about to inject a lethal dose of truth into this entire toxic dynasty. Beatrice swallowed the entire contents of the flute in one long, aggressive gulp. I watched the muscles in her throat work, counting the seconds in my head like a metronome. 1, 2, 3. She lowered the glass, a single drop of champagne clinging to her lip, and smiled at me with the satisfaction of a predator that believes it has just swallowed the canary. I smiled back, raised my water glass, and took a delicate, hydrating sip. The chemical reaction would not be instant, but on an empty stomach combined with the carbonation of the champagne, the absorption rate would be accelerated. I gave it 4 minutes. Maybe 5. Beatrice turned back to the crowd. She gripped the microphone stand with her left hand, her knuckles turning white. The spotlight hit her vintage ivory gown, illuminating the sweat that was already beginning to bead on her forehead. The sedative was hitting her vascular system. She tapped the microphone again. The screech of feedback made the front row wince. Among them sat Senator Williams and his wife, two of the biggest donors to her Heritage Charity Foundation. Beatrice usually treated them with a reverence bordering on worship, so she began, her voice booming a little too loudly. We are all here, the whole circus. A few polite, confused chuckles rippled through the audience. Dante looked up, his brow furrowed. Beatrice swayed. It was a subtle movement like a pine tree in a breeze, but I saw it. The disinhibition phase was starting. The benzodiazepine was stripping away her social filters layer by layer. She pointed a manicured finger directly at Senator Williams. Look at you, Charles, sitting there like a bloated toad. You think I do not know about your little offshore accounts? You think I do not know why you donate to my charity? It is not because you care about the children. It is because you need the tax write-off for your mistress's apartment. The silence on the lawn was instant and vacuum-sealed. Senator Williams dropped his fork. His wife gasped, her hand flying to her pearl necklace. Dante stood up halfway. Mom, what are you saying? Beatrice swiveled her head toward him. The movement was jerky, uncoordinated. Her eyes were glazing over, pupils dilated. Sit down, Dante, she roared the microphone, amplifying the slur in her speech. Always so weak. Just like your father. I had to carry him, and now I have to carry you. Do you know how exhausting it is? Pretending you have talent, you draw pretty lines, Dante, but you do not know how to build a legacy. I built this. Me. I bought your career. I bought your acceptance into the firm. I even bought this ridiculous vineyard for the day because you wanted to play Prince. She laughed, a wet, guttural sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. And the money, she mumbled, leaning heavily onto the podium, now the sweat running down her face in rivulets, ruining her expensive makeup. You all think it goes to the scholarships, you idiots. You rich, gullible idiots. I earned that Birkin. I earned the trips to Monaco. It is my management fee. Phones were up everywhere. I saw the flashes. I saw the red recording lights. The live stream comments were probably scrolling faster than the eye could see. This was not just a scandal. This was a confession to embezzlement. Dante was frozen, his face a mask of absolute horror. He looked at me, pleading for an explanation, but I just sat there, my face composed, watching the inevitable biological conclusion. Beatrice's face suddenly went slack. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving them a sickly paste-like gray. Her hand flew to her abdomen. The potent laxative I had identified in the reflection was making its presence known. Her stomach let out a sound so loud it was audible even without the microphone, a deep churning roar that signaled a catastrophic failure of the gastrointestinal system. "Oh," she groaned, the microphone pressed against her chest, catching the whimpering sound. "No, not now." She tried to step away from the podium, but her legs were like jelly. The sedative had compromised her motor functions. She stumbled backward, her heel catching on the hem of her dress. Her body convulsed. She gagged, her hands clawing at the air. Then, with the force of a geyser, she vomited. It was violent and voluminous, a mixture of expensive champagne and hors d'oeuvres, spraying across the pristine white tablecloth of the head table. She spun around, trying to find balance, but there was none. She pitched forward, arms flailing, and crashed directly into the 5-tier wedding cake. The collision was spectacular. The cake, a masterpiece of fondant and sugar flowers that had cost $4,000, exploded. Beatrice landed face first in the ruins, the buttercream frosting coating her like plaster. She groaned, trying to push herself up, but her body betrayed her again. A dark spreading stain blossomed rapidly across the back of her ivory dress. The smell hit us a second later. Chaos erupted. Waiters dropped trays. Guests shrieked and scrambled backward. The senator's wife was frantically typing on her phone. Dante rushed to the stage, slipping on a piece of cake, his tuxedo shoes sliding in the frosting. "Mom! Mom!" he screamed, trying to pull her up from the wreckage. Beatrice was moaning, incoherent, her words bubbling through the frosting. "She did it," she slurred, pointing a shaking cake-covered finger blindly into the crowd. "The pharmacist. She did it." Dante looked back at me, his eyes wide and frantic. I stood up, smoothing the silk of my dress, and walked toward the disaster with the calm pace of someone approaching a minor spill in aisle 4. "Call an ambulance," I ordered the nearest waiter. "Tell them it is a suspected overdose and severe gastrointestinal distress." Before I could reach the stage, a blur of red silk intercepted me. It was Vanessa. She grabbed my shoulders, her nails digging into my skin. Her eyes were wild, manic. "You witch!" she screamed, shaking me. "You poisoned her. I saw you near the glasses. I saw you looking at her. I shoved her off me with a force that surprised her. She stumbled back in her high heels. "Do not touch me," I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a scalpel. "You are making a scene, Vanessa, and you are accusing me of poisoning my own mother-in-law on my wedding day. Do you have any idea how insane you sound?" She admitted it. Vanessa shrieked, pointing at the writhing figure of Beatrice. "She said she was going to fix you. She told me in the bathroom. She said she had a special cocktail for the bride." The crowd went silent again. Vanessa realized too late what she had just said. She had just admitted to being an accessory to conspiracy. She had admitted she knew Beatrice planned to drug me. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "So you knew," I said loud enough for the senator to hear. "You knew she was planning to drug me and you said nothing. You let her walk out here with a weaponized drink." Vanessa's mouth opened and closed. She looked at Dante, who was staring at her with a look of dawning betrayal. I thought it was just a little something to calm you down," Vanessa stammered, digging her grave deeper. "She said you were nervous." "Interesting," I said, "because based on the smell and the vomit, that was not a calming agent. That was a chemical assault, and you just confessed to being an accomplice." Dante looked from Vanessa to his mother, who was now weeping and heaving in the cake. The reality of his life, the facade of his perfect family, was dissolving in front of him. The sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. The paramedics burst into the tent, pushing through the stunned guests. They loaded Beatrice onto a stretcher. She was a mess of bodily fluids and sugar-muttering curses, her dignity completely obliterated. As they wheeled her out, Dante ran after the stretcher, leaving me standing alone in the center of the ruins. The guests were whispering, staring at me with a mix of fear and awe. I did not care. I signaled the staff to start clearing the tables. Suddenly, a cold hand grabbed my wrist. I turned ready to fight, but it was not Vanessa. It was Emily, Jamal's wife. Jamal was Dante's younger brother, the quiet one, who always looked at the floor. Emily was pale, her skin almost translucent under the tent lights. She pulled me aggressively toward the shadows of the catering entrance, away from the prying eyes and the cameras. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You switched them," she hissed, her voice trembling. "Do not lie to me, Tasha. I saw you. I was watching from the side. You switched the glasses." I looked at her. Emily had always been meek, the kind of woman Beatrice ate for breakfast. But there was a fire in her eyes now, a terrified, desperate fire. "I did what I had to do," I said, keeping my voice low. "Self-defense, Emily." Emily let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. She leaned in close, her breath hitching. "She did it to me," she whispered. 3 years ago, at my baby shower." I froze. What Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Beatrice planned my baby shower. It was at her house. She insisted on making me a special mocktail. She said it was a family recipe for health. I drank it. An hour later, I was in the bathroom. The cramps. Tasha. They were not normal cramps. It felt like my insides were being torn out. She gripped my arm harder, her nails digging in. "I lost the baby," she choked out. "I was 4 months pregnant. The doctor said it was a spontaneous miscarriage, but I knew. I always knew. She never wanted Jamal to have kids. She said it would distract him from the family business." She looked at me when I was being loaded into the ambulance that day, and she smiled. The same smile she gave you before the toast. A cold horror washed over me. This was not just petty jealousy. This was not just a toxic mother-in-law wanting to embarrass a rival. Beatrice was a monster. She had murdered her own grandchild to maintain control. I looked at Emily. Really looked at her. I saw the grief she had been carrying, the terror of living under the thumb of a woman capable of such evil. "You are sure?" I asked. "I am an accountant, Tasha," Emily said, wiping her face furiously. "I used to manage the books for her charity before she forced me to quit. I found receipts from online pharmacies on the dark web, orders for misoprostol, orders for high-grade sedatives. I didn't have the courage to do anything. I was scared she would do it again." "But you fought back." She looked at me like I was a superhero or maybe a demon. It didn't matter. I took Emily's shoulders. "We are going to finish this. Tonight. Do you still have access to those books? The receipts?" Emily nodded. "I made copies. I have a flash drive. It is in my safe at home." "Go get it," I said. "Meet me at the hospital. Beatrice is going to try to spin this as food poisoning or a stroke. She is going to try to play the victim. We need to bury her before she can even wipe the frosting off her face." Emily took a deep breath and nodded. "I am with you." Jamal needs to know. He needs to know she killed his son." "Go," I urged her. As Emily ran toward the parking lot, I smoothed my dress one last time. I looked back at the reception tent. The party was over. The illusion was dead. I walked toward the waiting town car I had hired for the getaway. I wasn't going on a honeymoon. I was going to war. And I had the biggest weapon of all, the truth backed by a forensic trail of receipts. Beatrice wanted a show. I was about to give her the grand finale. The VIP wing of Atlanta General Hospital smelled of bleach and old money. Beatrice had demanded a private suite even as the paramedics were scraping frosting off her face. I sat in the waiting area, my custom silk wedding dress now wrinkled and stained with grass from where I had knelt to talk to Emily. I did not care. I felt like a soldier in the trenches waiting for the enemy to reload. Emily sat next to me, clutching her laptop bag like a life preserver. She had stopped crying, but her leg was bouncing nervously. We had been there for 2 hours. The doctors had pumped Beatrice's stomach and put her on fluids. She was stable, humiliated, empty, and likely furious, but alive. The double doors swung open and Dante walked out. He looked exhausted. His tuxedo tie was undone, hanging loose around his neck, and his eyes were red. He did not look at me with concern. He did not ask if I was okay after having my wedding ruined. He looked at me with suspicion. "She is awake," Dante said, his voice flat. "She wants to see me. Alone." I stood up. "No, Dante. We are doing this together. She does not get to spin a narrative without me in the room to fact-check it." Dante stepped in front of me, blocking my path. He looked down at me, and for the first time in 3 years I saw a stranger. "She says you gave it to her, Tasha. She says she put her glass down to fix her dress and you handed her a new one. She says you were smiling when she drank it." I let out a short, incredulous breath. Of course she did. That is the oldest trick in the book. Darvo. Deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. "And you believe her?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "You saw her, Dante. You saw her confess on the microphone. She said she put the powder in. She bragged about it. She was delirious." Dante shouted, causing a passing nurse to glare at us. She was having a medical reaction. She did not know what she was saying. "But you were calm. You were too calm. Who calls 911 that calmly when their mother-in-law is collapsing?" "Someone who works in a trauma center," I shot back. "I am a clinical pharmacist. Dante. I deal with overdoses and toxicity every single week. Panic kills patients. Precision saves them." "Precision," Dante repeated, testing the word like it was poison. "That is exactly what Mom said. She said you are precise. She said you know exactly what to mix to make someone sick without killing them." I stared at him. The betrayal was a physical ache in my chest, colder than the hospital air. He was using my education, my career, the thing I had worked my fingers to the bone for, against me. He was twisting my competence into a weapon. "Let us go inside," I said, pushing past him. "I am not having this conversation in a hallway." I walked into the suite. Beatrice was propped up on pillows, looking small and frail. Her skin was still gray, but her hair had been brushed and someone had removed the ruined dress. Vanessa was sitting in the chair next to the bed, holding Beatrice's hand. The two of them looked like a tableau of grieving widow and dutiful daughter. It was sickening. When I entered, Beatrice let out a dramatic sob and turned her head away, burying her face in the pillow. "Get her out," Beatrice moaned. "Please, Dante. She tried to kill me." Vanessa stood up, her eyes flashing with righteous indignation. "You have some nerve coming in here, Tasha. After what you did." I ignored Vanessa completely. I walked to the foot of the bed and gripped the plastic rail. "Cut the act, Beatrice," I said. "We both know what happened. You tried to drug me with a benzodiazepine and a laxative cocktail. You wanted me to soil myself at the altar. I just made sure the person who bought the drink was the one who drank it." "Lies," Beatrice shrieked, sitting up with surprising energy for someone who had just had their stomach pumped. Dante listened to her. "She is admitting she messed with the drinks. She is admitting she switched them because you tried to poison her." Emily spoke up from the doorway. Her voice was shaking, but she stepped into the room. "Just like you poisoned me." Beatrice's eyes snapped to Emily. "Shut up, you mouse! No one is talking to you." Dante looked between his mother and his wife. He was drowning. He wanted the easy way out. He wanted his mother to be the saint she pretended to be, and he wanted me to be the problem he could fix or discard. And right now, discarding me seemed like the path of least resistance. "Tasha," Dante said, his voice trembling. "You have access to these drugs. You have a key to the pharmacy. You know dosages. Mom does not know the difference between Tylenol and Advil." "How would she get something like this?" I looked at my husband. I looked at the man I had promised to love and cherish just 6 hours ago. And I realized he was not a victim of his mother's manipulation. He was a volunteer. He was choosing ignorance because the truth was too expensive. You think your mother is innocent because she plays dumb? I asked. You think because she wears pearls and goes to church, she does not know how to use the dark web? I reached into my clutch. The movement made Dante flinch as if he thought I was pulling out a gun. In a way, I was. I pulled out the small sealed plastic bag containing the syringe. The liquid inside was clear, harmless looking. What is that? Vanessa asked, her voice shrill. I held it up to the light. This, I said, is the receipt. When I saw your mother spike my drink in the bridal suite, I did not just panic. I took a sample. I used a sterile pipette from my emergency medical kit to draw up 2 milliliters of the champagne before I switched the glasses. I turned to Dante and threw the bag at him. It hit him square in the chest. He fumbled to catch it, his hands shaking as he held the small plastic bag. Take it, I said, my voice hard as diamond. Take it to the lab down the hall. Tell them to run a full toxicology screen. Tell them to look for rohypnol metabolites and phenolphthalein. Dante stared at the liquid. If it comes back clean, I continued, stepping closer to him, I will sign the annulment papers tonight. I will walk away with nothing. I will plead guilty to whatever insanity you want to invent. But if it comes back positive for the exact cocktail of drugs that just put your mother in this bed, then you have a problem, Dante. Because that means your mother is not a victim, she is a felon, and you are an accessory after the fact if you keep protecting her. The room was silent. The only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Beatrice stopped crying. The sobbing ceased instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. She slowly lowered the tissue from her face. Her eyes were dry. The frailty vanished, replaced by a cold reptilian stillness. She looked at the bag in Dante's hand, then she looked at me. There was no fear in her eyes, only calculation. She realized she had underestimated me. She thought I was new money trash. She forgot that to get where I am, I had to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless than anyone born with a silver spoon. Dante looked at his mother, waiting for her to deny it. Waiting for her to scream that I was lying, that the liquid was water, that this was a trick. But Beatrice did not scream. She just watched him, her gaze heavy and suffocating. Give it to me, Dante, Beatrice said softly. Her voice was not weak anymore. It was commanding. Give me the bag. Dante hesitated. He looked at the evidence that could free him from a lifetime of lies, and then he looked at the woman who had built his cage. Do not do it, I warned him. If you give that to her, if you destroy that evidence, we are done. Not just the marriage. Everything. I will rain fire on this family. Dante looked at me, tears spilling over his lashes. She is my mother, Tasha, he whispered. He did not move to the lab. He did not move to the trash can. He just stood there paralyzed, holding the truth in his hands, too weak to use it and too terrified to destroy it. Beatrice smiled. It was a small, tight smile that did not reach her eyes. She knew she had him. She knew that even with the gun smoking in her hand, her son would jump in front of the bullet for her. But she did not have me. I pulled out my phone. I forgot to mention, I said, tapping the screen. I already sent half the sample to an independent lab via courier before I came to the hospital. That bag is just for you, Dante. A test of character. I looked at my husband with nothing but pity. And you failed. Beatrice's smile vanished. Her eyes darted from the bag to my phone, the calculation turning into genuine panic for the first time. Get out, she hissed. I turned to Emily, who was watching from the doorway, her face pale but her jaw set. Let us go, Emily, I said. We have work to do. I walked out of the hospital room, leaving my husband holding a bag of poison standing next to the woman who brewed it. I did not look back. The time for saving Dante was over. It was time to save myself. I should have been waking up to the sound of ocean waves crashing against the white sands of St. Lucia. I should have been ordering room service and turning off my phone for 2 weeks of marital bliss. Instead, I was standing under the humming fluorescent lights of the hospital pharmacy at 6 in the morning counting pills. The honeymoon was cancelled. Obviously. You do not go on a romantic getaway with a man who watched his mother try to poison you and then stood there holding the evidence like a deer in headlights. I threw myself back into work because the pharmacy made sense. Chemicals had rules. Dosages were exact. There was no gaslighting in a molecule of insulin. It either worked or it did not. But I underestimated Beatrice. I thought she would retreat to her mansion to lick her wounds and hire a PR firm to spin the wedding disaster. I forgot that a wounded animal is the most dangerous kind. 3 days after the wedding from hell, I was called into the office of the director of pharmacy, Dr. Aris. He was a stern man, a man who lived by regulations and compliance. He did not do small talk. He did not do drama. When I walked in, he did not offer me a seat. He slid a thick envelope across his mahogany desk. It bore the official seal of the State Board of Pharmacy. I opened it. My hands did not shake. I had trained myself out of shaking. The letter was a formal notice of investigation. An anonymous whistleblower had filed a detailed complaint alleging that I, Dr. Tasha Williams, was diverting Schedule II narcotics, specifically oxycodone and fentanyl. The report claimed I was skimming from the waste disposal logs and falsifying inventory counts to feed a personal addiction. I looked up at Dr. Aris. His face was a mask of professional concern, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. In our field, an accusation like this is a death sentence. Even if you are cleared, the stigma sticks to you like tar. This was filed yesterday. Dr. Aris said, his voice grave. They claim to have witnessed you pocketing vials during the night shift last Tuesday. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Last Tuesday. The night of my rehearsal dinner. The night I was surrounded by 50 people at a restaurant across town. Beatrice had gotten the dates wrong. She was sloppy. This is retaliation, I said, tossing the letter back onto the desk. My mother-in-law is trying to destroy my career because I did not let her humiliate me at my wedding. Dr. Aris frowned. Tasha, I know you are going through a personal crisis. The whole hospital has heard the rumors about the wedding. But this is the board. They do not care about family feuds. They care about missing drugs. If there is even a single pill unaccounted for, they will suspend your license pending a full hearing. I nodded. I knew the drill. Beatrice thought she was smart. She thought she could use the system to crush me because she assumed I was just like her, someone who cut corners. She did not realize that I was the most anal retentive pharmacist in the state. I did not just follow protocol. I was the one who wrote the new protocols. Pull the logs, I said. Dr. Aris hesitated. I already have the auditors coming in an hour. No, I said, stepping around the desk to his computer. Pull them now. Pull the Pyxis automated dispensing records for the last 6 months. Pull the biometric access logs. And pull the camera footage from the waste disposal unit. I typed in my override code. The screen filled with data. Beatrice accused me of stealing during disposal. It was a common way for addicts to steal. You claim you wasted half a vial, but you really kept it. I brought up the disposal logs. Look at the witness signatures, I pointed at the screen. Every single time I wasted a narcotic, I had a second pharmacist verify it. And not just any pharmacist. I made sure it was Karen, the head of compliance, because I know she is a stickler. I pulled up the inventory counts. Look at the variance report. 0.0% for 3 years running. Dr. Aris leaned in his eyes, scanning the data. He scrolled back weeks, then months. He looked for the gaps, the red flags, the discrepancies that usually signaled a problem. There were none. My inventory was mathematically perfect. It was cleaner than his own office. I turned to the camera footage archives. And if you want visual proof, here is the footage from last Tuesday, the night the complaint says I was here stealing. I pulled up the timestamp. The pharmacy was empty except for the night tech. I was nowhere to be seen. I pulled up a photo on my phone from the rehearsal dinner timestamped, showing me toasting with my father 3 miles away. Beatrice lied, I said. And she did a bad job of it. Dr. Aris sat back in his chair. He let out a long breath. He looked at the perfect logs, then at the letter from the board. She filed a false report with a government agency, he murmured. That is a felony. I stood up, smoothing my lab coat. Yes, it is. And I will be filing a counter-complaint. But right now I need to know if I still have a job or if I need to call my lawyer. Dr. Aris looked at me with a new level of respect. You have a job, Tasha. I will handle the auditors. I will send this data to the board myself. This complaint will be dismissed before lunch. Thank you, I said, turning to leave. Tasha, he called out. I stopped at the door. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I have met Beatrice. She is on the hospital donor board. She has pull in this city. She just tried to end your career. This was not a warning shot. This was a headshot. She missed this time, but she is playing dirty. You need to watch your back. I walked out of the hospital feeling a surge of adrenaline. I had won the battle, but the war was escalating. Beatrice was not just attacking my marriage anymore. She was coming for my livelihood. She wanted to strip me of everything I had built so that I would be nothing but the gold digger she claimed I was. I drove home with a singular focus. I needed to talk to Dante. I needed to know if he knew about this, if he knew his mother had tried to frame me for a federal crime, and if he had done nothing to stop it, then there was no marriage left to save. I turned onto our street in the historic district. The townhomes were lined with old oak trees, casting long shadows in the late afternoon sun. I pulled up to our driveway and hit the brakes. There was a white van parked in front of our garage. A man in blue coveralls was kneeling at the front door, drilling into the lock. Dante was standing behind him, arms crossed, looking at the ground. I parked the car haphazardly and stormed up the walkway. The sound of the drill was a screeching assault on my ears. What is going on? I demanded. Dante jumped. He looked at me and then he looked away, unable to hold my gaze. He looked like a man who had not slept in days, but that did not garner him any sympathy from me. Tasha, he said, his voice weak. You are home early. Why is there a locksmith drilling into my front door? I asked, my voice rising. The locksmith paused, looking back and forth between us. Sir, should I stop? Keep going? Dante muttered. I stepped between the locksmith and the door. No, you stop. This is my house. My name is on the mortgage. You touch that lock one more time and I call the police for vandalism. The locksmith stood up, holding his hands up in surrender. Look, folks, I do not want any trouble. I will just wait in the van. He retreated, leaving me alone with my husband on the porch. Explain, I said. Now. Dante took a deep breath, like he was preparing to recite a script he had been forced to memorize. Mom called me, he said. She told me about the investigation, the drugs. I stared at him. And she said we have to be careful, Tasha. She said if you are using or if you are in trouble with the law, we cannot have you in the house. It is a liability. The assets, the family reputation. She said I need to secure the property until you prove you are innocent. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not fear. It was pure, unadulterated rage. Secure the property, I repeated. You are locking me out of my own home because your mother lied to the police. She is just trying to protect us, Dante yelled, finally looking at me. His eyes were desperate, pleading with me to understand his twisted logic. She said, you are unstable. She said what happened at the wedding, the syringe. It was not normal behavior, Tasha. She thinks you might be dangerous. She told me to change the codes and change the keys just until everything is cleared up, just until you get help. I looked at the man I had married. I looked at the man who had vowed to protect me, to cherish me. And I saw a coward. A man so terrified of his mother that he would render his own wife homeless based on a lie he knew was a lie. He knew I was not an addict. He knew I was not a thief. But it was easier to believe I was a criminal than to accept that his mother was a sociopath. You want to secure the property? I asked, my voice deadly calm. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I opened the app for our home security system. With 3 taps, I deleted his user profile. I changed the master code. What are you doing? Dante asked, stepping closer. I am securing the property, I said. I walked past him to the keypad on the door. I punched in the new code. The lock clicked open. I stepped inside and turned to face him. Mom told you to change the locks until I proved I was innocent. Well, guess what, Dante? I just proved my innocence to the pharmacy board an hour ago. I have the logs. I have the footage. Your mother is the one who is about to be under investigation for filing a false police report. Dante's face crumbled. Tasha, wait. I did not know. You did not ask, I shouted, slamming my hand against the doorframe. You just assumed. You just followed orders. You tried to lock me out of my own house because Mommy told you to. I grabbed the handle of the heavy oak door. You want to talk about liability? You are the liability, Dante. You and your criminal mother. Tasha, please let me come in. We can talk about this. No, I said. You can go sleep at Beatrice's house. I am sure she has a room ready for you. It is where you belong. I slammed the door in his face. I threw the deadbolt. Then I engaged the secondary security latch. I leaned my back against the door, sliding down until I hit the floor. I could hear Dante pounding on the other side, calling my name, begging me to open up. But I did not move. I sat there in the foyer of the home we had bought together, listening to my marriage die on the front porch. Beatrice had wanted to separate us. She had wanted to drive a wedge so deep we could never recover. She had succeeded, but she had made a fatal error. She thought isolating me would make me weak. She thought taking away my husband would break me. She was wrong. Taking away Dante did not break me. It freed me. I was done playing defense. I stood up, wiped the single tear from my cheek, and walked into my home office. It was time to call Emily. It was time to call the lawyer. And it was time to show Beatrice exactly what happens when you corner a woman who has nothing left to lose. I checked into the Four Seasons not because I wanted to burn money, but because I needed a fortress. The security here was tight, and they did not ask questions when a woman in a business suit checked in with nothing but a laptop bag and a look of absolute fury. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, staring at the wall. My house was compromised. My marriage was dead. My career was under attack. I felt like a chess piece on a board where the rules kept changing. But Beatrice forgot one thing. I was not a pawn. I was the queen, and I was done playing defense. A knock at the door broke my trance. I checked the peephole. It was Emily. She looked terrified, wearing a trench coat that was 2 sizes too big, and constantly checking the hallway behind her like she was carrying nuclear launch codes. I opened the door and pulled her inside. You are safe here, I told her, locking the deadbolt and engaging the latch. Sit down. Do you want water? Or maybe something stronger? Emily shook her head. She sat on the velvet sofa, clutching her purse with white-knuckled intensity. She looked nothing like the woman I had seen at family dinners, the one who barely spoke above a whisper and spent her time cutting garnish for Beatrice's platters. There was a hardness in her eyes now, a desperate kind of resolve. I brought it, she said. Her voice was steady. I brought everything. She reached into her bag and pulled out a silver USB drive. It looked innocuous, small enough to swallow, but the way she placed it on the coffee table made it feel heavy. Beatrice thinks I am stupid, Emily said, staring at the drive. She thinks I am just Jamal's quiet little wife. She thinks I sit at home all day watching daytime television and waiting for my allowance. She forgot who I was before I married her son. Who were you, Emily? I asked, sitting opposite her. I was a CPA, Tasha. I was a senior auditor for Deloitte. I managed accounts for Fortune 500 companies. I know how to track a penny through a hurricane. My jaw dropped slightly. I had known Emily for 3 years, and I never knew she had a career. Beatrice had always introduced her as a homemaker, as if that was the only thing she was capable of. Beatrice made me quit. Emily continued, her voice bitter. When I got pregnant the first time, she told Jamal that a working mother was a neglectful mother. She said the family image required traditional values. She threatened to cut Jamal off if I did not resign. So I did. I quit my job to save my marriage, and then she killed my baby anyway. The room went cold. The grief radiating off Emily was palpable, but it was fueling her now. I started doing the books for her charity about a year ago, Emily said. She fired her old accountant because he asked too many questions. She thought since I was family, and since she had broken me, that I would be safe. She thought I would just enter the numbers and look the other way. She was wrong. Emily plugged the USB into my laptop. She opened a spreadsheet that was a labyrinth of numbers and columns. This is the Heritage Charity Foundation ledger, she said, pointing to a column of expenses. On the surface, it looks clean. Scholarships, community outreach, gala expenses. But look closer. She clicked on a tab labeled Miscellaneous Overhead. Here I asked, pointing at a recurring payment of $5,000 a month to a consulting firm I had never heard of. That is not a consulting firm, Emily said. That is a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. I traced the ownership. It leads back to a private account under her maiden name. And look at this. She highlighted a series of transactions from last month totaling $50,000. The line item read, Venue deposit for fundraiser. There was no fundraiser last month, I said. Exactly, Emily said. I cross-referenced the transaction dates with her travel itinerary. She was in Las Vegas that weekend. And look who else was in Las Vegas. She pulled up a credit card statement. A supplementary card issued to the charity account. The name on the card was Vanessa King. Vanessa, I whispered. The ex-girlfriend. The one who accused me of poisoning Beatrice. She is not just an ex-girlfriend, Emily said. She is on the payroll. Beatrice uses the charity funds to pay off Vanessa's gambling debts. That is why Vanessa does whatever Beatrice says. She owns her. Vanessa is in deep with some very bad people, and Beatrice is the only thing keeping her knees from getting broken. That is why she lied at the wedding. She had to. I stared at the screen. This was not just embezzlement. This was a criminal enterprise. Beatrice was using donor money intended for underprivileged children to fund her lifestyle and keep her minions loyal. But that is not the worst part, Emily said. Her hands were shaking now. Tasha, you need to see the trust documents. She opened another folder. These were scanned copies of legal papers yellowed with age. They were dated 20 years ago, signed by Dante's grandfather. Grandpa Marcus left a trust fund for the boys, Emily explained. It was supposed to vest when they turned 30. $5 million each. It was meant to give them independence so they could build their own lives without relying on the family business. $5 million. I felt sick. Dante had always told me his money was tied up in family investments managed by his mother. He said we had to live on his salary and my income because the family wealth was illiquid. Beatrice forged the amendment documents, Emily said. Look at the signature dates. Grandpa Marcus died on the 12th. These amendments transferring full control of the principal to Beatrice were signed on the 14th. She forged a dead man's signature to steal her own children's inheritance. This is why Dante is so afraid of her, I realized aloud. It is not just psychological, it is financial. He thinks she holds the purse strings. He thinks he needs her to survive. He does not know, Emily said. Neither does Jamal. She tells them the market is down. She tells them the trust is underperforming. She gives them an allowance like they are teenagers to keep them docile. But the money is theirs, Tasha. It has always been theirs. She stole $10 million from her own sons to fund her social climbing. I looked at Emily. This woman had been living in a nightmare. She had been robbed of her career, her child, and her financial future. And she had stayed quiet, collecting evidence, waiting for a moment to strike. I was that moment. We have enough to put her away for life, I said. Fraud, embezzlement, forgery. And with the toxicology report from the wedding, we have assault and battery. Emily nodded, tears finally spilling over. I want her gone, Tasha. I want her to pay for my baby. I want Jamal to be free. We will free them, I promised, taking her hand. But we have to be smart. We cannot just go to the police yet. We need to secure the assets first. If she knows we are coming, she will drain the accounts and flee. She has offshore setups. We need to freeze her out before we lock her up. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a harsh, vibrating sound against the wood. I looked down. It was a notification from my bank, my primary checking account, the joint account I shared with Dante. The account where I had deposited my savings from 5 years of working double shifts and holidays. Alert withdrawal in the amount of $200,000. Balance remaining 0. I stared at the screen. The air left my lungs. $200,000. That was everything. That was the down payment for my own practice. That was my safety net. Who, I whispered. I opened the app. The transaction details loaded. It was a wire transfer. Authorized by Dante Williams, my husband. He emptied the account. Emily gasped, looking over my shoulder. I stood up. The room spun. Beatrice. It had to be Beatrice. She knew I was dangerous. She knew I had evidence. She ordered Dante to cut off my resources. She wanted to starve me out. She wanted me broke and desperate so I could not afford a lawyer, so I could not fight back. And he did it. He actually did it. He stole my life savings on his mother's command. I felt a cold rage settle over me, deeper and darker than anything I had felt at the wedding. At the wedding, I was a victim. Now I was a target. They think this cripples me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. They think taking my money makes me weak. I looked at Emily. She looked terrified. What do we do? She asked. You have no money. I looked at the USB drive on the table. I looked at the evidence of $10 million in stolen trust funds. I looked at the ledger of a charity that was essentially a piggy bank for a sociopath. I do not need my money, I said. I have something better. I have leverage. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had not called in years. It was Sterling. It was my ex-boyfriend from college, the one who graduated top of his class at Harvard Law and now ran the most vicious asset recovery firm in D.C. Tasha, he answered on the second ring. It has been a long time. Sterling, I said. I have a job for you. It involves a corrupt charity, a forged will, and $10 million in stolen assets, and I need you to foreclose on a house. Which house? Sterling asked. My husband's house, I said, or rather his mother's house. I want to buy the debt. Today. But you just lost your liquid cash, Emily reminded me. I smiled at her. It was not a nice smile. I did not lose it, Emily. Dante just moved it for me. He thinks he gave it to his mother. But he actually just gave me the justification to take everything they have. I turned back to the phone. Sterling, I am sending you a file. I want you to freeze everything. And then I want you to help me become the new owner of the Williams family estate. Beatrice wanted a war over money. She was about to learn that she was fighting a woman who counted atoms for a living. I did not just want my money back. I wanted the roof over her head. I wanted the floor under her feet. I wanted her to know what it felt like to be truly, utterly homeless. Let us get to work, I told Emily. The dinner party is in 3 days, and I need to make sure I am the one holding the deed when the dessert is served. I did not knock on the glass door of Williams & Sons Architecture. I did not ask the receptionist if Dante was available. When the young woman at the front desk tried to stand up and tell me that Mr. Williams was in a private meeting, I simply held up a hand and kept walking. The sound of my heels on the polished concrete floor was a rhythmic declaration of war. I was done being the polite pharmacist. I was done being the supportive wife. I was a woman who had just been robbed of $200,000 by the man I slept next to, and I was coming to collect. I kicked the door to the corner office open. It swung back and hit the wall with a satisfying crash. There they were, the dynamic duo of my destruction. Dante was sitting behind his expansive glass desk, looking like a man trying to shrink inside his own suit. Beatrice was lounging on the white leather sofa, sipping an espresso, looking entirely too comfortable for a woman who was currently under investigation by the state for filing a false police report. Dante jumped when he saw me. He stood up so fast his chair rolled back and hit the window. "Tasha," he stammered. "What are you doing here?" "We are working." "Working," I repeated, walking into the room and closing the door behind me. "Is that what you call it? Is wire fraud considered work these days? Or is it just a hobby?" Beatrice set her espresso cup down. She did not look rattled. She looked bored. "Tasha, darling, lower your voice. This is a place of business. We do not need you acting like a fishwife in front of the clients." I walked right up to the desk and placed my hands flat on the glass surface, leaning in until I was inches from Dante's face. "Where is my money, Dante?" Dante swallowed hard. His eyes darted to his mother, looking for a script, looking for permission to speak. "It is not your money," Tasha Beatrice answered for him, her voice smooth as silk. "It is family money. Dante and I were discussing the liquidity issues with the Heritage Foundation. We needed a bridge loan to cover some operational costs until the grants clear. Dante being the dutiful son and partner that he has decided to invest." "Invest," I said, looking at Dante. "You invested our life savings, the money for my practice, the money for our future children. You gave it to her?" Dante finally looked at me. His face was pale, sweaty. "She said it was an emergency, Tasha. She said the accounts were frozen because of some clerical error with the audit. She said if I did not transfer the funds today, the charity would default on the scholarship payments. We could not let those kids down. It is just a loan. We will get it back with interest next month." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound that seemed to suck the air out of the room. "You believe her," I said. "You actually believe her. There is no clerical error, Dante. There are no scholarships. I saw the ledger. I saw the offshore accounts. I saw the $50,000 she spent on Vanessa's gambling debts. You did not invest in a charity. You donated to the Beatrice Williams Lifestyle Fund." Beatrice stood up, smoothing her skirt. "That is slander. And frankly, it is irrelevant. You are married. In the eyes of the law, what is yours is his. He has every right to manage the household finances as he sees fit. If he chooses to support his mother's legacy, that is his prerogative. You should be grateful he is including you in such prestigious philanthropy." I looked at her. She was wearing a diamond tennis bracelet I had never seen before. It caught the light from the window, sparkling with arrogance. I realized then that my money was likely already gone. It was probably on her wrist or in a wire transfer to the Cayman Islands. "You are right, Beatrice," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "Marriage does involve shared assets, shared liabilities. It is a partnership." I turned back to Dante. "Speaking of assets, Dante, let us talk about the house. Our beautiful Victorian in Georgetown, the one we spent 3 years renovating. The one where you told me we were building a legacy." Dante looked confused by the change of subject. "What about the house? We own it. Grandpa Marcus bought it for us cash. It is in the family trust. You know that." I reached into my bag. I did not pull out a syringe this time. I pulled out a document. A simple public record I had pulled from the county clerk's office on my way over. "That is what she told you," I said. "She told you Grandpa bought it cash. She told you the deed was held in the Williams family trust for tax purposes. She told you we just had to pay the property taxes and the upkeep." I slid the paper across the desk. "Read it, Dante. Read the deed." Dante looked down. He picked up the paper. His eyes scanned the lines. I saw the moment the reality hit him. His brow furrowed. His mouth opened slightly. "Owner of record," he read. "Beatrice Williams." I nodded. "Not a trust. Not us. Her. Grandpa Marcus did not buy that house for us, Dante. He left the money to her and she bought it in her own name. She let us live there. She let us pour our salaries into renovations. She let us increase the equity. But she owns every single brick." Beatrice sniffed. "It was for estate planning purposes. You do not understand complex wealth management, Tasha. Stick to counting pills." I ignored her. "Keep reading, Dante. Look at the encumbrances." Dante turned the page. He stopped breathing. There is a lien, he whispered. A mortgage. A second mortgage, I corrected. A home equity line of credit, to be exact. Taken out 18 months ago. For the maximum appraisal value. $450,000. Dante looked up at his mother. Mom. You mortgaged our house. It is my house. Beatrice snapped, her facade cracking just a fraction. And I needed the capital. The market was down. The overhead on the charity was high. I leveraged the asset. It is standard business practice. You cashed out the equity we built, I said. We paid for the new roof. We paid for the kitchen remodel. We increased the value and you drained it dry. Where is the money, Beatrice? Did that go to the scholarships too? Beatrice waved her hand dismissively. It is tied up. You would not understand. I understand perfectly, I said. I understand that you have not made a payment on that line of credit in 6 months. Dante dropped the paper. 6 months. I looked at my husband. He looked like a child who had just found out Santa Claus was actually a burglar stealing the presents. She stopped paying Dante. She took the cash, 450 grand, and she stopped paying the bank. Just then, there was a knock on the glass door of the office. We all turned. A man in a cheap, ill-fitting gray suit was standing there. He did not look like a client. He looked tired. He held a thick stack of papers bound with a rubber band. He opened the door without waiting for an invitation. Are you Beatrice Williams? He asked, looking at the woman on the sofa. Beatrice drew herself up to her full height. I am. And you are trespassing. Security will remove you. The man walked over to the sofa and dropped the stack of papers on the coffee table in front of her. It made a heavy, ominous thud. You have been served, ma'am, he said. Have a nice day. He turned and walked out, leaving the door open. The sounds of the busy office filtered in, phones ringing, printers humming, the mundane sounds of a world that was continuing to turn while ours crashed and burned. Dante walked around the desk. He walked past me like a zombie. He picked up the papers. The top page was printed in bold, aggressive font. Notice of default and intent to foreclose. Dante read it out loud. His voice broke on the last word. Foreclose, he whispered. Mom, they are taking the house. Beatrice snatched the papers from his hand. It is a mistake, she hissed. I have a grace period. I was moving funds around. I will call the bank manager. I know him personally. We play bridge together. I will fix this. It is not a mistake, Beatrice, I said. I called the bank. You are in default. You have 30 days to pay the full balance of the loan plus penalties, or the property goes to auction. Dante sank onto the sofa, putting his head in his hands. We are going to lose the house, he moaned. Tasha, we are going to be homeless. I looked at him. I felt a flicker of the old instinct, the urge to comfort him, to fix it, to tell him we would figure it out. But then I remembered the notification on my phone. Balance 0. I remembered the locksmith drilling into my door. I remembered him standing there letting his mother call me a drug addict. We are not going to be homeless, Dante, I said. You are. Dante looked up. Tasha. I walked to the door. You stole my money, Dante. You gave it to the woman who tried to poison me. You thought you were buying her love, or maybe you thought you were buying your inheritance. But all you bought was a front row seat to your own ruin. I looked at Beatrice. She was frantically flipping through the foreclosure papers, her hands shaking, the diamonds on her wrist, clicking against the table. 30 days, Beatrice, I said. Tick-tock. I walked out of the office. The receptionist stared at me as I passed. I gave her a bright, sharp smile. Have a wonderful day, I told her. I walked out to my car, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had no money, I had no house, I had no husband. But I had the truth, and I had Sterling. I picked up my phone and dialed the number again. Sterling, I said when he answered. It is confirmed. The house is in default. The auction is scheduled for next month. Good, Sterling said. His voice was the calm in the storm. Do you want me to proceed with the acquisition strategy? Yes, I said. I want that debt. I want to own the paper on that house. Use the shell company. Do not let them know it is me. I want to buy it for pennies on the dollar when the bank unloads it. But Tasha Sterling asked, You don't have the liquidity anymore. Dante drained the account. How are we funding this? I looked at the engagement ring on my finger. It was a 3-carat solitaire, a family heirloom from Dante's grandmother, the only decent woman in that lineage. It was insured for $150,000. And I had a liquidity portfolio of stocks I had inherited from my own aunt years ago that Dante knew nothing about because I had kept my name on them. I have resources, I said. Just get the paperwork ready. I am going to be their landlord, Sterling, and I am going to be the worst landlord they have ever seen. I hung up the phone. I started the car. I was driving toward a future that was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was mine. Beatrice had started a fire. She didn't realize she was trapped in the building, and I was the one holding the only key to the exit. I sat in the high-back chair of my hotel room and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were dry, my hands were steady, but I needed to look like a woman who had been crying for 3 days straight. I reached for the bottle of saline solution I kept in my travel kit for contact lenses and squeezed 2 drops into each eye. I rubbed them until the sclera turned a convincing shade of irritated pink. Then I messed up my hair just enough to look distressed, but not unhinged. I was about to give the performance of a lifetime. The foreclosure notice I had seen on Dante's desk was my golden ticket. Beatrice was drowning. She had leveraged everything to maintain the illusion of wealth. And now the bill collectors were knocking. She needed money. She needed a bailout. And I was going to dangle it in front of her like a raw steak in front of a starving lion. I picked up my phone and dialed Dante. I let it ring 4 times. I knew he was staring at the screen, debating whether to answer. He was terrified of me, but he was more terrified of being homeless. Hello. Dante's voice was a whisper. He sounded like a man who had aged 10 years in 24 hours. Dante. I choked out, adding a tremble to my voice that I did not feel. I cannot do this. I cannot let us lose the house. I cannot let us lose everything. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. I could practically hear the hope sparking in his chest. Tasha, you mean, you want to come home? I sniffled loudly. I miss you, Dante. I know things got crazy. I know we said terrible things. But we are husband and wife. And I cannot sit here in a hotel while you are suffering. I have money, Dante. The magic word. Money. You do? Dante asked, his voice sharpening. But the joint account. I thought. I have a separate inheritance, I lied smoothly. From my aunt. I never touched it. It was supposed to be for our retirement. But if the house is in trouble, if your mother is in trouble, I can help. I can pay off the arrears. I can save the house. Dante let out a sob. Oh my God, Tasha. Thank you. Thank you. I knew you still loved me. I knew you would not abandon us. Mom is here. She is really stressed. Can I tell her? Put her on, I said. There was a fumbling sound, and then Beatrice's voice came on the line. It was not the voice of a woman who had just been caught stealing or vomiting into a wedding cake. It was the voice of a monarch who had temporarily misplaced her crown but expected it back immediately. Well, Tasha, Beatrice said, I see you have finally come to your senses. I gritted my teeth so hard my jaw clicked, but my voice remained meek. I am sorry, Beatrice. I overreacted. I just want to fix this. I have the funds to cover the mortgage default. I can wire it tomorrow. I just want my family back. Beatrice made a humming sound of approval. A wise decision. Although money alone does not fix the damage you caused to my reputation. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that wedding reception was? The rumors? The looks? People are saying I am unstable. People are saying I am a thief. I took a deep breath. I know. I am so sorry. I want to make it up to you. You will make it up to me, Beatrice declared. If you want to come back into this family and if you want Dante to take you back, you need to clear my name. I want a dinner party. A dinner party, I asked, feigning confusion. Yes. A formal dinner. At the house. Tomorrow night. I want you to invite the board members of the Heritage Foundation. I want you to invite Senator Williams and his wife. I want Vanessa there. And in front of everyone, I want you to apologize. I want you to tell them that you had a bad reaction to medication at the wedding, that you were delusional, and that you made up those horrible lies about me. You will tell them I am a saint who has been nothing but patient with her troubled daughter-in-law. I closed my eyes. It was perfect. She was digging her own grave with a silver spoon. She was gathering the audience for her own execution. I will do it, I said. I will organize everything. I will cater it. I will make sure everyone is there. I just want peace, Beatrice. Good, Beatrice said. And Tasha, make sure the wire transfer for the house clears before dinner. We do not want the mood spoiled by financial unpleasantness. Of course, I said. I will take care of everything. I hung up the phone. The mask dropped instantly. I walked over to the minibar, opened a sparkling water, and drank it in one long swallow. Beatrice wanted a show. She wanted to parade her victory in front of the elite. She wanted to watch me kneel. She had no idea that I was not building a stage for my apology. I was building a gallows for her reputation. I spent the next 4 hours making calls. I called the caterers. I called the florists. I called the invite list. I put on my best repentant wife voice. Please come, I told Senator Williams' assistant. It is a reconciliation dinner. We want to put the unpleasantness of the wedding behind us. Beatrice is so eager to see you. They all agreed. Of course they did. Rich people love a train wreck, especially when there is free lobster involved. I made sure Vanessa was coming. I sent her a personal text telling her I wanted to bury the hatchet and that I understood she was just looking out for Dante. She replied with a smug emoji. She was coming to gloat. Good. I wanted her front and center. Then came the most important call. The call that would seal the trap. I sat on the edge of the bed and dialed a number that was programmed into my phone under a fake name. Sterling, I said when he answered. Tasha Sterling's voice was deep and smooth, the voice of a man who crushed corporations for breakfast. I got your file. This is messy. I do not want messy, Sterling. I want absolute. What is the play, he asked? I just got off the phone with Beatrice. She thinks I am wiring her money to pay off the mortgage arrears tomorrow. She thinks I am saving the house. And are you? No, I said. I am buying it. There was a pause on the line. Buying it. Tasha, the foreclosure auction is not for another 3 weeks. You cannot buy it on the open market yet. I do not want to buy the house on the market, Sterling. I want to buy the note. I want to buy the debt from the bank. I could hear Sterling shifting in his chair. That is aggressive. The bank usually bundles those toxic assets. They do not sell single mortgages to individuals. They do if the individual is a holding company representing a distressed asset fund, I said. And they do if the buyer offers to pay the full principal plus the outstanding interest in cash immediately. The bank wants this off their books. They do not want to deal with an eviction and an auction. They want the money. You want me to approach the bank as a third-party investor? Sterling clarified. Exactly. I transferred the funds from my liquid stock portfolio to your escrow account an hour ago. It is enough to cover the entire lien. I want you to call the bank's loss mitigation department. Tell them you represent a private equity firm that specializes in acquiring high-risk real estate. Offer them a buyout of the mortgage note. Sterling laughed low in his throat. You are evil, Tasha. I love it. So you buy the note, you become the lender. And then what? And then I said, leaning back against the headboard, I foreclose. Beatrice is 6 months behind. The moment I own the paper, I have the right to accelerate the loan. I can demand payment in full immediately. And when she cannot pay because I am not wiring her a dime, I take the title. You want to own the house she is living in, Sterling said. I want to own the floor she walks on. I want to own the roof she sleeps under. I want to evict her from the property she stole my husband's future to leverage. Okay, Sterling said. I can make the call. But Tasha, this has to be timed perfectly. If she finds out you are the buyer, she will tie you up in court for years. She will not know I promised. The holding company is anonymous, and by the time she realizes what happened, it will be too late. The dinner party is tomorrow night. Can you close the deal by 5 p.m. tomorrow? It is tight, Sterling said. But for you, I will make it happen. I will have the papers signed and the deed transferred to your LLC before the first appetizer is served. Do it, I said. I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding, but it was a good rhythm, a strong rhythm. Beatrice thought she had won. She thought she had broken me. She thought she was getting her mortgage paid and her reputation restored. She was about to find out that the only thing getting restored was the natural order of the food chain, and she was no longer at the top. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Tomorrow night, I would walk into that house not as a guest, not as a victim, and certainly not as a repentant daughter-in-law. I would walk in as the landlord. And landlords have keys. Landlords have rights. And landlords can kick out tenants who destroy the property. I went to my suitcase and pulled out the dress I had bought for the honeymoon. It was white. Not bridal white, shark white, sleek, sharp, and predatory. It was perfect. I hung it up on the doorframe. Get some sleep, Beatrice, I whispered to the empty room. You are going to need it. The house looked magnificent. Beatrice had pulled out all the stops. The driveway was lined with luxury sedans and valet attendants in crisp red jackets. The windows glowed with the warm light of expensive chandeliers, and the sound of a string quartet drifted out onto the lawn. It was a perfect facade, a glittering shell hiding the rot inside. I pulled my car up to the curb, bypassing the valet. I wanted my keys in my hand. I walked up the stone path, my shark-white dress moving around me like liquid armor. I had my hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. My makeup was flawless. I did not look like a woman who had spent the last 3 days in a hotel room plotting the demise of her in-laws. I looked like a CEO arriving for a hostile takeover, which in a sense I was. The front door was open. Beatrice was standing in the foyer greeting guests. She was wearing emerald green silk, a color that clashed violently with her soul, but looked expensive enough to distract from it. She saw me and her smile tightened, but she did not break character. Tasha, she cooed loud enough for the senator behind me to hear. You made it. We were worried you might have gotten cold feet about making amends. I smiled back. It was the same smile I used when a patient tried to argue about their copay. Professional, polite, and completely unbothered. I would not miss this for the world, Beatrice, I said. I promised you a show, didn't I? Beatrice's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing the double meaning, but she brushed it off. Go put your bag in the kitchen, she ordered, dropping her voice to a whisper. And grab a tray. The servers are running behind, and I need you to pass the champagne. It is the least you can do after ruining the wedding toast. I looked at her. She wanted me to serve. She wanted to reduce me to the help in front of the very people she claimed I was not good enough for. It was petty. It was classic Beatrice. Of course, I said. Anything to help. I walked into the kitchen. It was chaotic. Caterers were shouting, pots were clanging. I saw Emily in the corner arranging canapes. She looked up when I entered, her eyes wide. You came? She whispered. I winked at her. The cavalry is here, Emily. Is the projector set up? She nodded. In the living room, connected to the main sound system. I tested it myself. Good. I grabbed a silver tray of champagne flutes and walked back out into the party. I moved through the crowd, offering drinks with a serene smile. I saw the whispers. I saw the side eyes. They all knew about the wedding. They all thought I was the crazy daughter-in-law who was here to beg for forgiveness. I saw Dante in the corner talking to Vanessa. Vanessa was wearing a red dress cut low enough to be a hazard. She was laughing, her hand on Dante's arm, staking her claim. Dante looked miserable, but he did not pull away. He saw me approaching with the tray and his face flushed with shame. Tasha, he said. You shouldn't be serving. "It is fine, Dante," I said, offering him a glass. "Your mother asked me to. I am just doing what I am told. Like a good wife." Vanessa smirked. She reached for a glass, her eyes locked on mine. "So glad you could make it, Tasha," she said. "It takes a big person to admit when they are wrong. Although I am surprised you showed your face after the wedding. If I were you, I would have moved to another state." "I am not going anywhere, Vanessa," I said sweetly. "I like this neighborhood." She took a sip of champagne, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Oops," she said suddenly. She tilted her glass. A stream of sticky amber liquid poured directly onto the front of my white dress. It soaked into the fabric instantly, a dark, ugly stain spreading across my chest. "Oh no," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with fake concern. My hand slipped. "I am so clumsy." The conversation nearby stopped. Everyone looked. Beatrice hurried over, looking delighted. "Oh dear," she said. "Tasha, look at you. You are a mess. You cannot give your speech looking like that. Go upstairs and change. I think there are some old cleaning rags in the laundry room you can use." The guests tittered. Dante looked at the floor. I looked down at the stain. Then I looked at Vanessa. She was smiling, waiting for me to cry, waiting for me to run away. I did not cry. I laughed. "It is okay," I said, grabbing a napkin from the tray and dabbing at the stain without any real urgency. "Accidents happen, Vanessa. Just like the accident at the wedding. But do not worry. I came prepared." I handed the tray to a passing waiter. "If you will excuse me," I said to the group, "I need to slip into something more appropriate." I walked up the grand staircase, feeling the eyes of the room on my back. I did not go to the laundry room. I went to the master bedroom. I had my bag stashed there earlier by Emily. I opened the bag and pulled out the suit. It was not a dress. It was a white tuxedo, sharp lapels, tailored waistbands that made my legs look a mile long. It was a power suit. It was the kind of outfit a woman wears when she is about to sign a billion-dollar deal or bury a body. Tonight I was doing both. I changed quickly. I slicked my hair back even tighter. I put on a fresh coat of red lipstick. I looked in the mirror. The stain was gone. The victim was gone. I walked back downstairs. The transformation was instant. The chatter stopped. Beatrice looked up from her conversation with the senator, and her jaw actually dropped. I did not look like a repentant daughter-in-law. I looked like I owned the place. I walked to the center of the room near the fireplace where the projector screen had been set up for the video. I picked up the microphone that had been left on the podium. "Testing," I said. The sound was crisp and clear. Beatrice rushed over, hissing, "What are you wearing? You look ridiculous. This is a formal dinner, not a boardroom meeting. Just play the video and apologize so we can eat." I smiled at her, a genuine, terrifying smile. "You are right, Beatrice," I said into the microphone. "It is time." I turned to the crowd. "Good evening, everyone," I said. My voice filled the room, commanding attention. "Thank you all for coming tonight. As many of you know, there was an incident at my wedding last week." Murmurs of agreement, heads nodding. "Beatrice wanted me to gather you all here tonight to clear the air," I continued. "She wanted me to explain what happened. She wanted me to apologize for the misunderstanding, and I agreed. Because I believe the truth is the most important thing in a family. And tonight I have prepared a special presentation to show you exactly what happened." Beatrice nodded, looking smug. She thought I was about to play a montage of photos with a voiceover about how stressed I was and how sorry I was for my outburst. I signaled to Emily, who was standing by the laptop. "Hit it, Emily." The lights dimmed. The projector whirred to life. A giant image appeared on the screen. It was not a photo of me crying. It was a high-definition video feed. The timestamp in the corner read 1 week ago. The location was labeled Bridal Suite, Camera 2. The room went silent. On the screen, a woman in a vintage ivory dress walked into the frame. It was Beatrice. She looked over her shoulder, checking the door. Then, with crystal clarity, she reached into her clutch. She pulled out a small packet. She hovered over the champagne flute with the white ribbon. She dumped the powder in. She stirred it with her finger. A collective gasp went through the room. Beatrice froze. She stared at the screen, her face going white. That is not, she stammered. The video continued. It showed me walking in. It showed Beatrice smiling, handing me the glass. It showed the reflection in the mirror as I switched them. Then the audio cut in. It was a different clip, a voice recording. I knew that pharmacist bitch was trouble. Beatrice's voice boomed through the speakers. It was the recording Emily had captured from the kitchen 3 days ago. But do not worry, Vanessa. Once the board investigation starts, she will lose her license. She will be broke, and Dante will come crawling back to you. The money in the trust is almost ours. We just need to keep Dante scared. The senator stood up. He looked at Beatrice with an expression of pure disgust. Is this true, Beatrice? He asked. You drugged your daughter-in-law. You are trying to frame her. Beatrice looked around wildly. It is a deep fake, she screamed. It is AI. She made it up. She is a witch. I stepped forward. Is the foreclosure notice AI too? Beatrice, I asked. I pulled a document from my jacket pocket. I checked the public records, I said to the room. This house, the one we are standing in, is in default. Beatrice mortgaged it to the hilt 18 months ago. She owes $450,000, and she has not made a payment in 6 months. Dante looked at his mother. Mom, you said you paid it. You said my investment saved it. I did, Beatrice yelled. I wired the money yesterday. Tasha gave it to me. I laughed. I did not give you a dime, Beatrice, I said. I told you I would. I let you plan this party. I let you invite all these people. I let you think you were safe. But I did not pay your mortgage. Then who did? Beatrice shrieked. The bank called me this morning. They said the note was purchased. They said the debt was settled. I did, I said. I took a step closer to her. I bought the note. Beatrice, I bought the debt from the bank this afternoon. I own the paper on this house. I looked at Dante. I looked at Vanessa. I looked at the stunned crowd. And as the new note holder, I am exercising my right to accelerate the loan. The full balance is due immediately. Since you are in default, and since I know for a fact you do not have the cash because I checked the charity ledgers too, I paused for effect. I am foreclosing. Right now. This is my house, and you are all trespassing. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the projector cooling fan. Beatrice stood frozen in the center of the Persian rug, her face a mask of alabaster terror. The foreclosure announcement had stunned them, but this was different. This was visceral. I pointed the remote at the screen. You wanted a video, Beatrice, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a diamond cutter. You wanted me to show everyone the truth about what happened at the wedding. You wanted an apology. Well, here it is. I pressed play. The image on the screen was crystal clear. It was not a shaky cell phone video. It was 4K security footage, high definition, and wide angle. It showed the interior of the bridal suite at the vineyard. The timestamp in the corner counted down the seconds to the crime. There on the screen was Beatrice. She looked magnificent in her vintage ivory gown, the same one that had been ruined by cake and vomit just hours later. She was pacing. She checked the door. She checked the windows. It was the behavior of a woman who knew she was about to do something illicit. A gasp rippled through the room as the on-screen Beatrice reached into her clutch. The movement was sharp and practiced. She pulled out a small white packet. She walked over to the table where the 2 champagne flutes sat waiting. I watched the faces of the guests. Senator Williams was leaning forward, his mouth slightly open. His wife was clutching her pearls, her eyes darting from the screen to the real Beatrice standing just 10 feet away. On the screen, Beatrice hovered over the glass with the white ribbon. She tore the packet open with her teeth. She dumped the powder in. It cascaded into the golden liquid, fizzing briefly before dissolving. She did not stop there. She reached out with a manicured pinky finger and stirred it. She wiped her finger on a napkin and then checked her reflection in the mirror, smiling. It was undeniable. It was raw. It was the smoking gun. Beatrice let out a strangled sound. "It is fake," she screeched, her voice cracking. "It is a deep fake. You made it on a computer. You can do anything with technology now. Do not believe her." I paused the video right on the frame where she was pouring the powder. The zoom was incredible. You could see the label on the packet. You could see the malicious intent in her eyes. "Is the audio fake too?" Beatrice, I asked. I did not wait for an answer. I signaled Emily again. The video faded and a waveform appeared on the screen. This was not from the wedding. This was from the kitchen of this very house, recorded just 3 days ago, when Emily had visited to help prep for this party. The speakers crackled, and then Beatrice's voice filled the room. It was loud, clear, and dripping with venom. I knew that pharmacist bitch was trouble. The guests flinched. The vulgarity was shocking, coming from the woman who prided herself on being the epitome of grace and etiquette. "But do not worry, Vanessa," the recording continued. "Once the board investigation starts, she will lose her license, she will be broke, and Dante will come crawling back to you. The money in the trust is almost ours. We just need to keep Dante scared. We just need to make sure he thinks she is a liability." I looked at Dante. He was staring at the speakers, his face draining of color. He looked like a man who had been punched in the gut. He had defended his mother. He had locked me out of my house for her. He had stolen my money for her. And here she was on tape calling him a pawn, calling him weak. The recording continued. Vanessa's voice chimed in, laughing. "What if she fights back? What if the board clears her?" "Then we escalate," Beatrice's voice replied. "I have friends in the DA's office. I have friends at the bank. We will bury her in legal fees. I used the charity funds to pay off your bookie, didn't I? I can use the charity funds to buy a judge if I have to. The donors are idiots. They never check the ledgers. They just want the tax write-off and the gala invite." The recording ended with the sound of clinking glasses. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a room full of people realizing they had been played for fools. Senator Williams stood up slowly. He was a large man, imposing, with a reputation for having a short temper when it came to his money. He walked over to Beatrice. He did not look at her like a friend anymore. He looked at her like a prosecutor. "You used the charity funds?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Beatrice stepped back, her hands fluttering nervously. "Charles, please. It is out of context. We were joking. It was just girl talk." "Girl talk," the senator roared. "You called us idiots. You admitted to embezzlement on tape. I donated $50,000 to that foundation last month for a scholarship fund. Are you telling me that money went to pay off a bookie?" Beatrice looked around wildly for support. She looked at Vanessa, but Vanessa was backing away toward the French doors, trying to make herself invisible. She looked at Dante, but he was staring at the floor, broken. "It was a loan," Beatrice stammered. "A temporary allocation of resources. I intended to pay it back." "You intended to steal my inheritance to pay it back," I corrected her from my spot by the fireplace. I walked over to the table where the hors d'oeuvres were getting cold. I picked up a folder that had been sitting next to the ice bucket. Emily found the ledgers, Beatrice. She found the shell companies. She found the payments to Vanessa. She found the online orders for the drugs you used to poison me. And she found the forged amendments to the family trust. I tossed the folder onto the coffee table. It slid across the surface and stopped right at the senator's feet. "It is all there, Charles," I said to him. "Every penny, every lie. She has been running a Ponzi scheme with your donations for 5 years. She mortgaged this house to cover the losses, and when that wasn't enough, she tried to frame me to get access to my assets and Dante's trust." The senator picked up the folder. He flipped through the pages. His face turned a shade of purple that matched the eggplant appetizers. He looked at his wife. "Call the police," he said. "No," Beatrice screamed. "Charles, wait. We can work this out. I have assets. I have connections." "You have nothing," the senator shouted. "You are broke, Beatrice. You are a fraud, and you are going to prison." The room erupted. The guests, the elite of Atlanta society, turned on her instantly. They were checking their phones, checking their bank accounts, realizing that the woman they had toasted with was a criminal who had been picking their pockets with a smile. One of the board members, a woman named Mrs. Higgins, who was known for her pearl necklaces and her piety, walked up to Beatrice and slapped her. It was a sharp cracking sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "My daughter's tuition," Mrs. Higgins hissed. "You said you were investing it for the endowment. You stole it." Beatrice held her cheek, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of remorse, tears of a narcissist who had lost her audience. "Dante, help me," she wailed, turning to her son. "Do something. They are attacking your mother." Dante looked up. His eyes were hollow. He looked at me, standing in my white tuxedo, untouchable. He looked at the screen where his mother was still frozen in 4K resolution, poisoning my drink. "You called me weak," Dante whispered. "On the tape, you said you had to keep me scared." Beatrice froze. "Dante, baby, I didn't mean it. I was just talking. I love you. You stole my trust fund." Dante said, his voice rising. "You stole Tasha's money. You tried to kill my wife, and you think I am weak." He laughed. It was a broken, jagged sound. "I am weak. Mom, I was weak because I listened to you. I was weak because I let you run my life. But I am not weak enough to go to jail for you." Dante turned his back on her. He walked over to where I was standing. He looked like he wanted to touch me to beg, but he saw the look in my eyes and stopped. He knew. He knew there was no coming back from this. "Tasha," he said. "I didn't know." I looked at him. I believed him. He didn't know about the embezzlement. He didn't know about the poison. But he knew enough. He knew his mother hated me. He knew she was manipulative. And he chose her anyway. Ignorance is not a defense, Dante. It is a choice. I turned away from him and looked at Vanessa. She was trying to open the French doors, trying to slip out into the night. "Going somewhere." "Vanessa," I called out. She froze. The entire room turned to look at her. "I wouldn't leave if I were you," I said. "You are on the tape too. You are an accessory to fraud and conspiracy to commit assault. If you run it, just makes you look guilty." Vanessa turned around, her face pale. "I was just doing what she told me. She owes me money. She said if I helped her get rid of you, she would pay off my debts." There it was, the final nail, the confirmation that this was a paid hit job. Beatrice let out a scream of pure rage. She lunged at Vanessa, her hands clawing. "You traitor! You stupid little leech!" Senator Williams stepped in and grabbed Beatrice by the arms, holding her back. She thrashed and kicked, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. The mask was completely gone now. The elegant socialite had dissolved, revealing the desperate, vicious creature underneath. And then, over the sound of her screaming, we heard it. Wail. The rising and falling tone of sirens. Blue and red lights began to flash through the sheer curtains of the front windows, painting the room in a chaotic strobe of authority. I walked over to the window and looked out. 3 police cruisers were pulling into the driveway. An unmarked black sedan followed them. That would be the FBI. Emily had done her job well. The federal authorities did not take kindly to charity fraud involving wire transfers. I turned back to the room. Beatrice had stopped screaming. She heard them too. She slumped in the senator's grip, her body going limp as the reality of her situation crashed down on her. "It is over, Beatrice," I said. The front door burst open. Uniformed officers poured into the foyer. "Beatrice Williams," a voice boomed. Beatrice looked at me one last time. Her eyes were filled with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "You ruin everything," she hissed. I smiled. My shark-white suit gleamed in the flashing police lights. "I didn't ruin anything, Beatrice. I just turned on the lights, and the cockroaches are finally scattering." The officers entered the living room. One of them, a stern woman with a badge on her belt, walked straight up to Beatrice. "Beatrice Williams, you are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and assault. You have the right to remain silent." As they clicked the handcuffs onto her wrists, I picked up my glass of champagne from the tray on the table. It was untouched, clean. I raised it to her. "To justice," I said, and I drank. The red and blue lights pulsing through the sheer curtains were not a suggestion. They were a command. The front door did not just open, it was breached. A team of uniformed officers and agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI swarmed into the foyer. The sound of heavy tactical boots hitting the marble floor echoed like thunder in the silent house. It was a sound that signaled the end of an era and the beginning of a cage. Beatrice stood in the center of the room. Her emerald green dress, which had cost more than my first car, suddenly looked like a costume. A cheap wrapper on a rotten candy. She tried to maintain her posture. She tried to summon the imperious glare that had terrified board members and bullied waiters for decades. But you cannot bully a federal warrant. A tall woman with a badge clipped to her belt stepped forward. She did not look impressed by the chandeliers or the Persian rugs. She looked at Beatrice the way an exterminator looks at a particularly large termite. "Beatrice Williams," the agent announced, her voice flat and professional. "I am Special Agent Miller with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. You are under arrest." Beatrice let out a high, incredulous laugh. It sounded brittle, like glass breaking. "Arrest?" she scoffed. "Do not be ridiculous. This is a misunderstanding. My daughter-in-law is having a mental health crisis. She called you here on false pretenses. If you leave now, I will not call the commissioner and have your badges." Agent Miller did not blink. She reached behind her back and pulled out a pair of steel handcuffs. "We are not here because of a phone call, Mrs. Williams. We are here because we have been reviewing the forensic accounting files provided by your former accountant, Emily Williams. We have traced the wire transfers. We have the logs from the offshore shell companies. And we have the toxicology report from the hospital regarding the poisoning of Tasha Williams." The agent stepped closer, invading Beatrice's personal space. "You are charged with 4 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of embezzlement, money laundering, and 1 count of aggravated assault with a chemical agent. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." The room held its breath. This was it, the moment the monster lost her teeth. Beatrice did not turn around. She lunged, not at the agent but at Dante. She grabbed the lapels of his tuxedo, shaking him with a strength born of pure panic. "Dante, do something," she shrieked. Her face was contorted, her eyes bulging. Tell them who we are. Call the family lawyer. Call the judge. Do not just stand there, you useless boy. Fix this. I did everything for you. I built this life for you." Dante stood there like a statue made of ice. His hands hung limp at his sides. He looked at his mother. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time in his life. He saw the sweat ruining her makeup. He saw the desperation. He saw the woman who had stolen his inheritance, mortgaged his home, and tried to kill his wife, all while claiming it was for his benefit. "I cannot fix this," Mom, Dante whispered. His voice was hollow. "You broke it. You broke everything." Beatrice's face twisted into a snarl. She raised her hand to slap him, to discipline him one last time for his disobedience. Agent Miller was faster. She caught Beatrice's wrist in midair. She twisted it behind Beatrice's back with a practiced motion that forced Beatrice to bend over at the waist. "That is assault on a federal officer," Agent Miller said calmly. "Add it to the list." The handcuffs clicked. It was a sharp mechanical sound. Click, click. The sound of consequences finally arriving. Beatrice let out a wail that was not human. It was the sound of a narcissist realizing the mirror had shattered. "No," she screamed, thrashing against the restraint. "You cannot do this. I am Beatrice Williams. I am the chairwoman. I own this town. You own nothing," I said from the sidelines. My voice was quiet, but in the stunned silence it carried. "You do not even own the dress on your back, Beatrice. It was paid for with stolen money." The officers began to march her toward the door. She dug her heels into the expensive rugs, dragging them, leaving furrows in the fabric. She was not leaving with dignity. She was leaving kicking and screaming, stripping away every last shred of the elegance she had faked for so long. As the commotion moved toward the foyer, I saw a flash of red movement in my peripheral vision. It was Vanessa. She was edging toward the French doors that led to the patio, her eyes darting around like a trapped rat. She thought everyone was distracted. She thought she could slip into the night and pretend she was never here. She reached for the handle. "Going somewhere, Vanessa." The voice was soft, but it stopped Vanessa cold. It was Emily. My quiet, mousy sister-in-law was standing by the patio doors. She was not holding a weapon. She was holding a stack of file folders. She looked taller than I had ever seen her. Vanessa turned a fake smile plastered on her face. "Emily, sweetie, I am just feeling a little faint. I need some air. I think I should go home." "You are not going home," Emily said. She stepped in front of the door, blocking the exit. "You are the signatory on the Cayman accounts, Vanessa. I saw your signature. You are the one who cashed the checks for the venue deposits that never existed. You are the co-conspirator." Vanessa laughed a nervous, high-pitched twitter. "That is silly. I was just a consultant. I did not know what Beatrice was doing." "You knew enough to take $50,000 to pay off your gambling debts," Emily said. Her voice was steel. "And you knew enough to help her plan the poisoning." "You are on the tape, Vanessa. I heard you." Vanessa's face hardened. "Move, Emily. You do not want to do this. You are just the accountant. You are nobody." Emily took a step forward. "I am the mother of the child she killed," Emily said. "And you helped her cover it up. You are not leaving this house until you are in handcuffs." Vanessa tried to shove past her, but Emily did not budge. She grabbed Vanessa's arm and twisted it, using the leverage of her anger. She shoved Vanessa backward, sending her stumbling into a waiter holding a tray of empty glasses. The crash was spectacular. Vanessa fell into the shards of glass, shrieking. Two officers broke away from the group escorting Beatrice and rushed over. "Vanessa King," one of them said, pulling her up from the floor. "We have a warrant for you as well." "Money laundering and conspiracy?" Vanessa started crying immediately. "It was not me," she sobbed, pointing a shaking finger at the door where Beatrice was disappearing. "She made me do it. She said she would kill me if I did not help. I am a victim. Tell it to the judge," the officer said, spinning her around and cuffing her. I watched as they were both dragged out. The room was a wreck. Broken glass spilled champagne, and the ruined reputation of the Williams family littered the floor. The guests were silent, huddled in groups, their phones lowered, now the reality of the scene too raw even for social media. Dante was still standing in the center of the room. He looked like a man who had survived a bomb blast but lost his hearing. He stared at the open front door, where the flashing lights of the police cruisers were painting the foyer in chaotic strokes of red and blue. He turned slowly to look at me. His eyes were empty. He looked at my white suit, at my calm face. He looked for the wife who used to make him coffee and organize his socks. She was not there. "Tasha," he whispered. I did not answer. There was nothing to say to him. He had made his choice when he took the syringe. He had made his choice when he drained our account. He was just a ghost now, haunting a house that belonged to me. I walked over to the table where the champagne was still sitting on the silver trays. I picked up a glass. It was crisp and cold. I walked over to Emily. She was trembling now, the adrenaline fading, leaving her shaking with the aftershocks of her bravery. "You did it," I told her. Emily looked at me, tears welling in her eyes. "We did it." I raised my glass to her. "To justice, Emily." She picked up a glass with a shaking hand and clinked it against mine. "To justice." We drank. The champagne tasted like victory. It tasted like freedom. Outside, the sirens wailed as they hauled Beatrice and Vanessa away. Inside, the air was clearing. The toxicity was being drained out of the house, one handcuff click at a time. I looked around the room at the stunned elite of Atlanta. "Please finish your drinks," I said to the room. The show is over, but the house is under new management, and I expect everyone to be out within the hour. I turned and walked toward the library. I had a phone call to make to Sterling. I needed to start the eviction paperwork for Dante immediately. I did not want him staying in my property a minute longer than legally necessary. The war was won. Now it was time to clean up the battlefield. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers finally faded from the living room walls, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt like it might crack the foundation. The guests had scattered the moment the handcuffs clicked onto Beatrice's wrists, fleeing the scene like roaches when the kitchen lights turn on. They left behind half-eaten canapes and glasses of expensive wine, abandoning the woman they had toasted just an hour before. Now it was just the three of us standing in the wreckage of the Williams dynasty. Me, Dante, and Jamal. Dante stood in the center of the Persian rug looking like a man who had survived a plane crash, only to realize he was stranded on a deserted island. He looked at the open front door where his mother had been dragged out screaming. Then he slowly turned his head to look at me. His eyes were wide and wet. He looked at me with the desperate hope of a drowning man spotting a lifeboat. "Tasha," he whispered. His voice cracked. "She is gone. It is over." I stood by the fireplace, my white tuxedo glowing in the dim light. I did not say a word. I just watched him. I watched the gears in his head turn as he tried to rewrite history in real time. He took a step toward me, his hands open in a gesture of surrender. "I am so sorry, Tasha," he said. "You have to know I was a victim too. She manipulated me my whole life. She controlled everything. The money, the business, my decisions. I was terrified of her. But you saved me. You exposed her. Now we can finally be free." He smiled. It was a weak, trembling thing that made my stomach turn. "We can start over." He continued, gaining a little more confidence when I did not immediately scream at him. "Right here, in our home, we can renovate, we can paint over the memories, we can make this place ours again just like we always planned." I let out a laugh. It was a short, sharp sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "Our home," I repeated. "Dante, do you have a hearing problem, or is it a comprehension issue? I told Beatrice an hour ago that this house was in foreclosure. Did you think I was making polite dinner conversation?" Dante blinked, confused. "But you said you fixed it. You said you were going to pay the arrears. That is why we had the dinner. To celebrate." "I said I would fix the problem," I corrected him. "I never said I would pay her debt." I walked over to the side table where my leather briefcase was sitting next to a vase of white lilies. I unlatched it. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I pulled out a thick file folder bound with a red rubber band. I threw it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud right next to the folder of evidence that had sent his mother to jail. "The bank did not wait for your mother's apology tour, Dante," I said. "The foreclosure auction was scheduled for 9 o'clock this morning. While you were picking out your tie and checking your reflection in the mirror, the gavel went down at the county courthouse." Dante stared at the file. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure. "Sold," he whispered. "The house was sold." "Yes," I said. "Sold to the highest bidder." Dante looked up at me, panic rising in his eyes. "Who bought it?" "We have to talk to them. I have contacts, Tasha. I know people in real estate. We can work something out. We can lease it back. We can pay rent until the trust fund issue is sorted and I get my money back. We can sign a long-term lease. I will talk to the new owner. I will explain that this is my family home." I shook my head slowly. The level of delusion was almost impressive. "You cannot lease it back, Dante," I said, my voice ice cold. "Because the new owner has a very strict policy. They do not rent to men who steal from their wives. They do not rent to men who stand by while their mothers poison their spouses. And they certainly do not rent to men who are currently unemployed and have zero assets." Dante frowned. "What do you mean? Who is the owner?" I walked over to the coffee table and flipped the file open. I pointed to the transfer deed on the top page. The ink was still fresh. Look at the buyer, Dante. Read the name of the LLC. He leaned down, squinting at the document. TW Holdings, he read aloud. He looked up at me blankly. He did not get it. He was so used to other people managing the details of his life that he could not connect the dots. TWI said, enunciating every letter. Tasha Williams. Dante froze. His mouth fell open. He looked from the paper to me and back to the paper. You, he breathed. You bought the house. I bought the debt, I said. I bought the note from the bank 3 days ago, and this morning I exercised my right as the primary lien holder to take the title. I own it, Dante. I own every single inch of this property. I own the marble floors you are standing on. I own the roof over your head. I own the wine cellar and the attic and the garden. This is not your family home anymore. This is my asset. Dante staggered back as if I had physically shoved him. But how he stammered. You said the account was empty. I transferred the money. I smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who had just cornered a rabbit. You transferred $200,000, I said. That was cute. But I had my own portfolio, Dante. Stocks I inherited years ago from my aunt. Money I never merged with you because deep down, I always knew I might need an escape hatch. I liquidated it all. I leveraged everything I had to buy this debt, because I wanted to make sure that when the dust settled, I was the one holding the keys. Dante looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. He looked at the paintings on the walls. He looked at the furniture. He looked at the life he thought he was entitled to. Tasha. Please, he said, his voice breaking. Do not do this. I am your husband. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. I hear the YMCA has vacancies. Or maybe you can find a nice cardboard box under the bridge. It would match your career prospects. Dante fell to his knees. He actually fell to his knees on my Persian rug. He reached out to grab the hem of my pants, but I stepped back. Babe, please, he begged, tears streaming down his face now. I love you. I made a mistake. I was weak. But I can change. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Just let me stay. Let me fix this. I looked down at him. I felt nothing. No pity. No love. No anger. Just a profound sense of disgust. You had your chance to fix it, I said. You had a chance in the hospital room when I gave you the syringe. You had a chance when I asked you about the money. You had a chance every single day for the last week, and every single time you chose her. You chose the criminal. You chose the abuser. I checked the diamond watch on my wrist. It is now 10:30 p.m., I said. I am giving you 1 hour, 60 minutes. You can take your clothes and your toiletries. Anything else, anything bought with family money or joint funds stays here to be liquidated to pay back the debts your mother incurred. Dante stayed on his knees, sobbing into his hands. He was useless. He was not going to pack. He was going to sit there and cry until someone came to save him. But nobody was coming. I looked at Jamal. He was standing by the window, silent and watchful. He looked different than Dante. He did not look broken. He looked relieved. Jamal, I said, help your brother off my floor. He is making a scene. Jamal walked over and grabbed Dante by the arm, hauling him up. Come on, Dante, Jamal said, his voice rough. It is over, man. Let us go. Dante shook him off. No, I am not leaving. This is my house. I have rights, squatters' rights. You have to evict me through the courts. It takes months, I laughed again. Actually, Dante, I said, walking toward the stairs. Since you transferred all our money out of the joint account, you effectively established that you do not contribute to this household. And since the title transferred this morning, you are technically trespassing. I have the police on speed dial. Do you really want to join your mother in a cell tonight? Dante went pale. He knew I would do it. He knew I had crossed a line and I was never going back. I walked up the grand staircase, my heels clicking on the wood. I went into the master bedroom. The bed was still made perfectly crisp and white. Beatrice had ordered the maids to clean it this morning. I walked into the closet. Dante's side was full of designer suits, silk ties, and Italian leather shoes, all bought with money he thought he had but never did. I grabbed a suitcase from the top shelf. It was a Louis Vuitton, heavy and expensive. I threw it onto the floor. I opened the drawers and started grabbing handfuls of clothes. I did not fold them. I shoved them in. Shirts, socks, underwear. I grabbed his shaving kit from the bathroom and threw it on top of the pile. I zipped the bag shut. It was bulging at the seams. I dragged it out to the landing. Dante was standing at the bottom of the stairs looking up at me like a child waiting for punishment. "Catch," I said. I shoved the suitcase. It tumbled down the stairs, hitting every step with a loud, heavy thud. Bang, bang, bang. It landed at his feet, spinning slightly. "That is your life, Dante," I said. "It is packed. Now take it and get out." Dante looked at the suitcase. He looked at me, standing at the top of the stairs, looking down on him like a judge. He finally realized there was no negotiation. There was no mercy. He grabbed the handle of the suitcase. He did not look back at me. He walked toward the front door, his shoulders slumped, his spirit crushed. Jamal looked up at me. He nodded once, a gesture of respect. Then he followed his brother. I walked down the stairs, slowly following them to the door. I wanted to see them leave. I wanted to lock the door behind them. I opened the heavy oak door. The night air rushed in. It was cold and wet. A storm had rolled in while we were inside. The rain was pouring down in sheets, hammering against the pavement. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Dante stepped out onto the porch. The wind whipped his hair into his face. He looked out at the rain, then turned back to me one last time. "Tasha, please," he whispered. "I have nothing." I looked him in the eye. "You have exactly what you deserve," I said. I grabbed the handle of the door. "Goodbye, Dante." I slammed the door. The sound was final, absolute. I threw the deadbolt. Click. I engaged the security latch. Click. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. I listened. I heard the sound of a car engine starting. I heard tires on wet gravel. And then I heard nothing but the rain washing away the stain of the Williams family from my driveway. I turned around and looked at the empty house. It was silent. It was big. And for the first time since I walked into it 3 years ago, it felt clean. I was the landlady, and I had just evicted the trash. 6 months is a long time in the life of a lie, but it is a blink of an eye in the timeline of justice. The seasons changed in Atlanta. The humid oppression of summer gave way to a crisp, biting autumn. The leaves turned gold and then brown, falling to the pavement to be crushed underfoot, much like the Williams family dynasty. I sat in the gallery of the Federal District Court, my posture perfect, my face a mask of serene indifference. I was not there to testify. I had already done that. I was there to witness. The courtroom was packed. Half the people were reporters, hungry for the final chapter of the Charity Queen scandal. The other half were former donors, eager to see the woman who had played them for fools get what she deserved. Beatrice was led in. She was not wearing vintage Dior. She was wearing a standard issue orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. She had lost weight. Her hair, once dyed a rich chestnut and sprayed into an architectural marvel, was now gray and limp, hanging in strings around her face. She did not look at the gallery. She stared at her hands, which were shackled to her waist. The judge was a woman with eyes like flint. She read the sentencing statement with a slow, deliberate cadence. For the crimes of wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and aggravated assault, Beatrice Williams was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. There would be no early parole. There would be no house arrest. Beatrice did not scream this time. She did not wail or blame anyone. She just slumped forward as if her spine had finally dissolved under the weight of her own corruption. The judge ordered immediate asset forfeiture. Everything Beatrice owned, which was technically nothing since she had mortgaged it all, was seized. The jewelry, the art, the designer bags she had bought with stolen scholarship money. It was all going to the auction block to pay back the victims. As the marshals hauled her away, she turned her head. Her eyes scanned the room until they found me. There was no fire left in them, only a vast empty darkness. I did not smile. I did not wave. I just watched her disappear through the side door, erasing her from my life as thoroughly as she had tried to erase me. But the fall of the House of Williams did not stop with the matriarch. Gravity pulls everything down. I drove my new Porsche through the downtown district a week later. I had a meeting with a new client for my consulting firm. I stopped at a red light on Peachtree Street. To my right, there was a crew of community service workers in neon vests cleaning the gutters. I looked closer. One of the workers was struggling with a heavy bag of trash. Her hair was frizzy, pulled back in a messy knot. She wiped sweat from her forehead with a dirty glove, leaving a smear of grime on her cheek. It was Vanessa, the woman who had worn red silk to my apology dinner and poured champagne on my dress, was now picking up discarded fast food wrappers and cigarette butts. She looked up as my car idled. She saw me. She saw the sleek lines of the car, the leather interior, the woman in the driver's seat who had won. Vanessa dropped the trash bag. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked around, hoping no one else had seen her humiliation, but she was on display for the entire city. She was a pariah. The DA had given her a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Beatrice. But the social sentence was life without parole. No one would hire her. No one would invite her to parties. She was radioactive. I pressed the accelerator as the light turned green, leaving her in my rearview mirror standing in the gutter where she belonged. My consulting firm had moved into a new high-rise office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I was reviewing contracts when my receptionist buzzed me. "There is a delivery for you, Tasha," she said. "Lunch." I frowned. I had not ordered lunch. "Send him in," I said, assuming it was a gift from a grateful client. The door opened. A man walked in wearing a faded polo shirt with a food delivery logo on the chest. He was holding a brown paper bag. He looked at the floor. His shoulders hunched, his gait shuffling and defeated. "Delivery for Tasha Williams," he mumbled. I knew that voice. It was a voice that used to whisper promises in my ear. A voice that used to tell me we were a team. "Dante," I said. He froze. His head snapped up. He looked at me sitting behind my executive desk. He looked at the view. He looked at the nameplate on my door. "Tasha," he breathed. He looked terrible. His face was gaunt, unshaven. His eyes were shadowed with exhaustion. "You are delivering food?" I asked. He swallowed hard, clutching the bag like it was a shield. "The firm let me go. After the arrest. After the news. They said I was a reputational risk. No other firm would touch me. I lost my license. I lost the apartment." He looked down at his shoes, which were scuffed and worn. "I am living in a basement unit in East Point," he whispered. "It has mold. The roof leaks." I leaned back in my chair. It was a stark contrast to the Victorian home he had felt entitled to. The home I now owned and rented out to a lovely family of doctors who actually paid their bills. "I am sorry to hear that, Dante," I said. My voice was neutral, void of pity. He took a step forward. "Tasha, I miss you. I miss us. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Can you help me? Just a little. Just to get back on my feet. I can work for you. I can file papers. Anything." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had handed me a bag of poison and asked me to destroy it. I looked at the man who had stolen my savings. "I already helped you, Dante," I said. "I helped you find your level. You are exactly where you are supposed to be." I pointed to the door. "Leave the food at the front desk. And Dante, do not come back here. Security is very strict about loitering." He stared at me for a long moment, searching for a crack in the armor, searching for the wife he had discarded. He found only the landlady. He turned and walked out. He did not look back. He was just a delivery driver now, a footnote in my biography. 2 days later, I drove out to the suburbs. I pulled into the parking lot of a small, bright storefront. The sign above the door was hand-painted in cheerful yellow letters. J and E Bakery. The smell of cinnamon and fresh bread hit me the moment I opened the door. The display cases were full of pastries, cakes, and cookies. There was a line of customers stretching to the back wall. Behind the counter, Emily was boxing up a dozen cupcakes. She was laughing. She wore a flour-dusted apron and her cheeks were rosy. She looked 10 years younger. She looked free. Jamal was in the back pulling trays out of the oven. He saw me and waved, a genuine smile breaking across his face. Tasha, Emily called out, wiping her hands on a towel. "You made it." I walked over and hugged her. She felt solid, real. "We recovered the trust fund I asked." Emily nodded, her eyes shining. "The lawyers finished the clawback yesterday. We got most of it. Beatrice had hidden it in shell companies, but your forensic team found it. Jamal and I have enough to run this place and buy a house. A real house, in our own names." She squeezed my hands. "We cut them off, Tasha." Dante tried to call Jamal asking for money. Jamal changed his number. "We are done. We are free." I looked around the bakery. It was warm. It was honest. It was built on truth and hard work. It was the legacy the Williams family should have had if they had not been consumed by greed. "I am so proud of you, Emily," I said. "You saved yourself." "We saved each other," she corrected. I bought a box of cinnamon rolls and a coffee. I sat at a small table by the window watching the people of Atlanta walk by. I saw families holding hands. I saw friends laughing. I saw a world that continued to turn despite the darkness I had walked through. I took a sip of coffee. It was bitter and hot and perfect. The war was over. The enemy was in a cage. The traitors were in the gutter, and the survivors were thriving. I checked my watch. I had a dinner reservation with Sterling. He had been hinting that he wanted to discuss more than just business lately. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the future. I was Tasha Williams. I was the clinical pharmacist. I was the landlady. And I had won. 1 year later, the view from the 42nd floor of the Sovereign Tower in Buckhead was breathtaking. The Atlanta skyline stretched out before me, a glittering tapestry of glass and steel that seemed to bow in reverence to the empire I had built. I swiveled my Herman Miller chair away from the window and looked at the gold nameplate on my desk. Tasha Williams, CEO, Williams Medico-Legal Consulting. I was not counting pills anymore. I was not standing under fluorescent lights for 12-hour shifts wearing orthopedic shoes. I was the expert witness that corporations feared. I was the consultant that hospitals hired when they realized their compliance protocols were failing. I had turned my trauma into a 7-figure business. When you survive a poisoning attempt by your own mother-in-law, you develop a very keen eye for liability. My assistant knocked on the glass door. She was a bright young woman named Chloe, fresh out of law school, sharp as a tack. "Mail call, Ms. Williams," she said, placing a neat stack of envelopes on my desk. Most of them were invoices, contracts, and invitations to charity galas, where I was now the guest of honor, not the help. But at the bottom of the stack, there was one envelope that did not fit. It was not made of high-quality linen paper. It was cheap, thin, and gray. The return address was stamped in red ink. Federal Correctional Institution, Tallahassee. I picked it up. The paper felt gritty against my manicured fingertips. It had been cleared by the censors, but it still carried the stench of desperation. It was from inmate 49201, Beatrice. I had not heard from her in 6 months. The last time I saw her, she was screaming threats as the marshals dragged her out of the courtroom. I slit the envelope open with my gold letter opener. A single sheet of lined notebook paper fell out. The handwriting was shaky, stripped of the elegant calligraphy she used to pride herself on. Tasha, the letter began. "I am writing to you because I am a woman of faith, and I believe in forgiveness. Prison is hard, Tasha. Harder than you could ever imagine. The food is inedible. The bedding is scratchy. The other women here do not respect who I am. They do not care about my legacy. I am suffering, Tasha. My arthritis is flaring up in this damp cell, and the medical staff here is incompetent. They give me generic ibuprofen. Me, Beatrice Williams. I took a sip of my sparkling water. The audacity was breathtaking. She was sitting in a federal prison cell for stealing millions and poisoning me, and she was complaining about the brand of painkillers. The letter continued. I have had a lot of time to think. I realize now that we got off on the wrong foot. I was protective of Dante. A mother's love can be fierce. Perhaps I went too far. But you have to understand my position. I was trying to save the family. I laughed out loud in the empty office. She was still doing it. Even from behind bars, she was rewriting the narrative. She was not a criminal. She was just a fierce mother. She was not a thief. She was a savior. But I am willing to put the past behind us, Beatrice wrote. I am willing to forgive you for the way you humiliated me at the dinner party. I am willing to forgive you for taking the house. Families should not hold grudges. And in the spirit of that reconciliation, I have a small request. I leaned forward. Here it was. The hook. My commissary account is empty. Dante does not answer my letters. Vanessa is useless. I need to buy basic necessities: shampoo, conditioner, snacks, decent coffee. I need $500, Tasha. It is a drop in the bucket for you now that you are so successful. If you send the money, I will know that you have accepted my apology and we can start rebuilding our relationship. I will put you on my visitation list. You can come see me. We can talk. I stared at the number. $500. She wanted $500 for shampoo. And in exchange, she was offering me the privilege of visiting her in prison. She was offering me her forgiveness, as if I was the one who had sinned. I put the letter down. I looked out the window at the city I had conquered. I thought about the woman I used to be, the Tasha who wanted to be liked, the Tasha who knit blankets for a nephew that wasn't hers, the Tasha who stayed silent when her boundaries were crossed because she wanted to keep the peace. That Tasha would have sent the money. That Tasha would have felt guilty. That Tasha would have thought maybe $500 was a small price to pay to stop the guilt. But that Tasha was dead. She died the moment she looked into a mirror and saw a syringe in her hand. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my personal checkbook. It was leather-bound, heavy, and expensive. I uncapped my fountain pen. The ink was black permanent. I dated the check. I wrote the payee inmate 49201. Then I wrote the amount. $5.00. I looked at the number. $5. It was precise. It was calculated. It was scientific. I pulled a piece of my company stationery from the drawer. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock with my name embossed in gold at the top. I wrote a note. Beatrice, I received your letter. I am glad to hear you are finding time to reflect. It sounds like you are exactly where you need to be. Regarding your request for funds, I have enclosed a check. I did the math, Beatrice. I looked up the current street value of the generic laxative powder you slipped into my champagne glass that day. It retails for about $4.50. I rounded up to $5. Consider this reimbursement for your investment in our relationship. Use it to buy a bar of soap and wash your conscience. Do not put me on your visitation list. I am busy running the empire you pretended to have. Signed, the landlady. I folded the check inside the note. I sealed the envelope. I did not lick it. I used the sponge. I did not want even a molecule of my DNA touching something that was going to her. I pressed the intercom button. Chloe, can you come in here, please? Chloe appeared instantly. Yes, Ms. Williams. I handed her the envelope. Mail this, please. Regular post. No rush delivery. And Chloe, yes, ma'am. If any more letters come from this address, shred them. Do not even open them. Just shred them. Understood. Chloe took the letter and left. I watched her go. It was done. The final tether was cut. I did not feel angry. I did not feel sad. I felt light. I felt like a helium balloon that had finally snapped its string. I stood up and walked to the coat rack. I grabbed my trench coat. It was Burberry. I put it on and tied the belt. I grabbed my bag. I walked out of my office past the rows of employees working on cases, past the awards on the wall, past the life I had built from the ashes of Beatrice's arson. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The doors opened, and I stepped out into the cool evening air. A silver Porsche Panamera was waiting at the curb. The engine was idling a low, powerful purr. The window rolled down. Sterling was in the driver's seat. He was wearing a navy suit that fit him like a second skin. He took off his sunglasses and smiled at me. It was a smile that promised everything: partnership, respect, a future. "Hey boss," he said. "You ready?" I walked around the car and opened the passenger door. I slid into the leather seat. It smelled like cedar and success. "I am ready," I said. "Did you handle the correspondence?" Sterling asked, pulling the car into traffic. "I did," I replied. "I settled her account." Sterling laughed. He knew me better than anyone. He knew exactly what that meant. $5, he guessed. $5, I confirmed. He reached over and took my hand, interlacing his fingers with mine. His hand was warm, solid. "Where do you want to go, Tasha?" "Dinner. Drinks. Paris." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had helped me buy the debt, who had helped me evict the toxicity, who had stood by me while I burned my old life to the ground. "Let us just drive," I said. "I want to see the city." Sterling nodded. He pressed the accelerator. The car surged forward, smooth and powerful. We merged onto the highway, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red around us. I looked into the side mirror. I watched the Sovereign Tower recede into the distance. Somewhere in a dark cell hundreds of miles away, Beatrice was waiting for a check that would buy her nothing but shame. Somewhere in a basement apartment, Dante was eating takeout alone. Somewhere on a roadside, Vanessa was picking up trash. They were all in the past. They were ghosts in the rear-view mirror, shrinking smaller and smaller until they were gone. I turned my head and looked forward. The road ahead was wide open. The windshield was clear. I smiled. It was not the polite smile of a daughter-in-law. It was not the terrified smile of a victim. It was the smile of a woman who owned the road. "Drive," I told Sterling, and we did. We drove into the night, leaving the wreckage behind us, chasing nothing but the horizon. The most powerful lesson from Tasha's journey is that self-preservation is not cruelty. It is a necessity. When toxic people mistake your kindness for weakness, you must be prepared to show them your strength. Tasha proves that in the face of gaslighting and betrayal, emotions are not your best weapon. Facts, documentation, and financial independence are. She didn't just survive. She prepared. By keeping her own assets separate and documenting the truth, she turned a trap into a triumph. Ultimately, we learn that you cannot save people who are committed to their own destruction, but you can always save yourself. If you enjoyed watching Tasha take back her power, hit that like button and subscribe for more satisfying stories of justice served cold.